Some creatures lurk only in the corners of our imagination. They appear in campfire stories, urban legends, and whispers between friends, too afraid to turn off the lights. But then there are beings that break through the veil, monsters that step into our world and leave behind a trail of terror that no skeptic can fully explain. One of the darkest and most enduring of these beings is known only as the Mothman. The first modern reports came in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in 1966. Witnesses described a towering humanoid figure with enormous wings and glowing red eyes that seemed to peer straight into their souls. But this was no ordinary monster lurking in shadows. It chased cars, perched on rooftops, and hovered near bridges. Within a year, the legend was burned into American history when the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Many swore the Mothman had been seen on or near the bridge before it fell. Was he a messenger, warning of doom? A cursed harbinger drawing death to those who glimpsed him? Or something worse, a predator not of this world? The Mothman has been spotted across decades and continents. From abandoned factories to airport runways, from nuclear disaster zones to lonely highways, the creature continues to appear where tragedy follows. Some encounters are well documented, others are whispered only in folklore, passed down like ghost stories in small towns, too afraid to put them into newspapers. Tonight, we will explore the 25 most terrifying legends of the Mothman. Some are tied to real events. Others blur the line between rumor and nightmare. Together, they form a chilling tapestry that makes one thing clear. The Mothman is not bound to a single place, or even to a single time. He goes where death lingers. He goes where fear is strongest. And he goes where you least expect him. So dim the lights and listen carefully. These are not just stories. These are warnings. The TNT area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was already a place steeped in whispers and local unease. Long before the events of November 15, 1966, the abandoned munitions plant, a remnant of World War II, had decayed into a labyrinth of rusting towers, cracked concrete igloos, and overgrown trails that twisted through shadowed forests. Locals avoided it at night, claiming that the air itself seemed heavier there, as if the land had absorbed decades of fear and violence. Some said the place was cursed, others simply called it a spot to be left alone. Yet it was here that the first modern sightings of the Mothman, a creature whose legend would terrorize the world, would begin. On that fateful night, two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, along with Steve and Mary Mallette, drove cautiously through the TNT area, headlights slicing through the thick darkness. The vehicle bounced over uneven terrain, sending leaves and small rocks skittering into the shadows. The air was thick with an uneasy stillness, broken only by the hum of the car's engine and the distant hoot of an owl. The couples joked nervously about the eerie landscape, but their laughter was fragile, hollow, and quickly fading. There was something about the silence of the place that felt alive, waiting, watching. As they rounded a bend near the factory gates, their headlights illuminated something that froze their blood. Standing there, as though waiting for them, was a figure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with wings folded tightly against its back. Its eyes glowed an unearthly red, like coals burning in a night fire. The light seemed to seep from them, burning into their retinas, leaving a sensation that would haunt their memories for decades. The Scarberries and Mallettes were paralyzed for a moment, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. The figure's shape was humanoid, yet somehow wrong. Its movements were unnatural, fluid, and silent. And the way it observed them felt intelligent, deliberate, almost predatory. Roger's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He whispered for everyone to remain calm, but his own voice trembled. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, yet fear rooted them to the spot, caught between disbelief and horror. Then, with a sudden, terrifying motion, the creature unfolded its wings. The span was enormous, stretching wider than the car itself. In a motion both graceful and impossible, it rose from the ground, hovering above the road. The air seemed to press down on the vehicle, heavy and thick, and a low, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the metal of the car. The couple's hearts raced as the figure followed them, gliding effortlessly alongside the car, its burning eyes never leaving their faces. Panic took over. Roger slammed the accelerator, tires screeching as the car careened over the uneven ground. Branches whipped against the sides, snapping and tearing at the paint. The creature stayed with them, its wings silent, shadowy, moving in perfect sync with their frantic driving. At one point, Mary Millette swore she could feel its gaze through the rear window, piercing, assessing, and weighing their terror. As the couples fled toward the outskirts of Point Pleasant, the creature remained for a few final, lingering moments before vanishing into the darkness. There was no sound of wings, no trace of its massive form. It simply disappeared, leaving only the residual terror and the glowing image of red eyes etched into their minds. They would never forget the sensation of being hunted by something beyond human comprehension. When they reached town and recounted their story to the police, disbelief was met with polite skepticism. No evidence remained, no tracks, no trace of a creature. Yet the couples insisted, and soon other townspeople began reporting similar sightings. Shadows moving in fields, red lights flickering in the woods, and an unsettling feeling that something immense and watchful had entered their lives. The TNT area, once merely abandoned and eerie, it became infamous, the birthplace of one of the most enduring and terrifying legends in American folklore. In the weeks and months that followed, the Scarberrys and Molettes began to notice more than just fleeting sightings. Tires would blow out inexplicably, animals vanished from nearby farms, and neighbors reported hearing strange, unidentifiable noises in the dead of night. The sense of being watched never left. Friends of the couples claimed to see fleeting glimpses of a large, winged silhouette across the tree line when driving past the TNT area. The legend spread, capturing the fascination and fear of the town, and eventually, the nation. To this day, the TNT area remains a place where shadows move differently and the night feels alive. Locals warn travelers to stay away, insisting that some things in the darkness are better left unseen. And though decades have passed, those who first encountered the figure recall the terror with crystal clarity. 7 feet tall, wings folded against its back, and eyes that burned like coals, staring into the very depths of their souls. For the Scarberrys, the Millettes, and countless others who came after, the memory of that night is permanent, a haunting reminder that some legends are born in darkness and refuse to let go. In the small town of Clendenin, West Virginia, life had always moved slowly, marked by the rhythm of the river and the quiet of the surrounding woods. The cemetery on the outskirts of town was a solemn place, filled with graves whose headstones bore the names of generations long gone. It was here, in the days before the world would hear of the Mothman in Point Pleasant, that 5 men would witness something so terrifying it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. These men were gravediggers, accustomed to the constant presence of death. They worked long hours in the cold, shifting soil and preparing the final resting places for the town's departed. Death was nothing new to them. They had seen it, smelled it, and handled it with care and precision. But on that particular day, as they prepared a burial site in late November of 1966, the air carried a weight that felt different, heavier, oppressive, almost alive. The wind had died, and the usual sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds were replaced by an unsettling silence that made their skin crawl. As they dug, one of the men, a tall and burly figure named Thomas, glanced up toward the edge of the tree line and froze. At first, he thought he was seeing a large bird perched atop a fallen branch. Its silhouette was vast, dark against the gray sky. But then the figure shifted. Wings, impossibly large, unfolded silently, stretching nearly 10 feet across. It was then that they saw the eyes, 2 glowing orbs of red that burned like embers in the fading light. The creature's gaze seemed to penetrate every thought, every memory, as if it were assessing not just the men, but the lives they had lived and the deaths they had overseen. A hush fell over the graveyard. The other men followed Thomas's gaze and collectively felt the same bone-deep chill. The creature circled above them with an elegance that was both graceful and horrifying. It moved without a sound, wings cutting through the air in an impossible silence. Time seemed to slow. Even the men's instinct to flee was paralyzed by a mix of awe and dread. As the minutes stretched, the creature began to rise higher, but it never left their sight completely. Its glowing eyes tracked them, following every subtle movement. The men noticed that no branch broke beneath its weight. No wind stirred from its passage. Was as if the air itself respected the presence of this being. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished into the darkening sky, leaving the graveyard bathed in the unnatural stillness of a silence that was almost too complete to bear. The gravediggers stood frozen for several moments, the only sound being the distant toll of the cemetery bell. Then, as though awakened from a nightmare, they dropped their shovels and fled. Not a single word was spoken as they ran toward the town, their hearts hammering, adrenaline fueling every step. They didn't stop until the lights of Clendenin were visible through the trees, and even then, the fear lingered like a shadow they could not shake. 4 days afterward, the men refused to return to the cemetery at night. They avoided even passing near it during the day. The memory of those glowing red eyes burned into their minds. Rumors began to circulate among the townsfolk, whispered in hushed tones, in grocery stores, bars, and churches. Some suggested they had seen a massive owl or a crane, but no one who had been present believed such a simple explanation could account for what they had witnessed. There was an intelligence in those eyes, a purpose that no ordinary animal could possess. The incident would soon be eclipsed by the more famous Scarberry and Millet sightings at the TNT area, just days later. But the gravedigger's encounter remained one of the earliest known modern encounters with the creature that would come to be called the Mothman. Scholars, paranormal investigators, and locals have studied it over the decades, each theory more speculative than the last. Some suggest the creature was a supernatural omen, a harbinger of doom appearing to those who were intimately familiar with death. Others believe it was a warning, a glimpse of something that sought to measure human fear and resilience. Despite the passage of time, the memory of that night in Clendenin has never faded. The 5 men grew old, yet they recounted the story with the same tremor in their voices as the day it happened. They described the creature's wings, the burning eyes, and the suffocating sense of being watched, always emphasizing the silence that screamed louder than any sound. They insist that anyone who has witnessed it can never truly forget, and that the TNT area and surrounding cemeteries are places where the boundary between the natural and the unexplainable grows thin. Even today, locals avoid the cemetery after dark, warning visitors to stay away from the trees lining the old graves. Those who do venture near speak of an uneasy feeling, a weight on their shoulders, as if unseen eyes are tracking their every move. And while no one has reported the exact same sighting in recent years, the legend of the gravedigger's omen has persisted, passed down from generation to generation. The story of that night serves as a chilling reminder that some encounters cannot be rationalized, that certain eyes watch us when we least expect it, and that sometimes the presence of death itself carries a warning. The gravediggers were simple men, accustomed to the soil and the stillness of the dead. Yet even they recognized the extraordinary terror before them. In the quiet of Clendenin, among the graves and the cold November air, they learned what many others would soon discover in Point Pleasant. Some legends are not merely stories, they are warnings. And some omens, once seen, can never be unseen. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge stood as a familiar artery of steel and suspension connecting the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio. For years, residents had driven its span daily, unaware that it would become the site of one of the deadliest bridge collapses in American history. Rush hour traffic clogged its lanes, cars and trucks inching along as drivers impatiently tapped their steering wheels, oblivious to the catastrophe looming above the Ohio River. Without warning, the bridge groaned. A low, menacing screech of twisting steel filled the air, echoing across the river valley like a monstrous scream. Bolts snapped under immense strain, the suspension cables buckling as if the bridge itself were taking its final breath. Vehicles plunged into the icy waters below, metal crumpling and glass shattering in an instant. 46 lives were lost in less than a minute, their deaths a chaotic swirl of ice-cold water and twisted wreckage. Survivors clung desperately to debris, screaming for help as emergency crews arrived in stunned silence, faces pale and eyes wide at the horror before them. Yet, for those who had lived in Point Pleasant during the months leading up to the collapse, the disaster was not entirely unexpected. There were whispers of a darker presence, something sinister that had been seen hovering over the bridge long before the structure failed. Truckers driving through the area late at night reported a giant winged figure perched on the beams, its glowing red eyes cutting through the darkness like twin searchlights. It would remain still for hours, a silent sentinel surveying the traffic below, before suddenly vanishing without a trace. Fishermen on the riverbanks told similar stories. They claimed that in the quiet hours before dawn, the creature could be glimpsed standing upon the bridge, wings folded tightly against its back, eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to bore into the very soul. Some swore that it appeared to grow larger the closer they got, as though feeding off their fear. Strange metallic noises accompanied its movements, sounds that resembled heavy footsteps or the scraping of metal across metal, echoing ominously through the night. Yet, when anyone attempted to investigate, nothing remained. No footprints, no evidence, only the cold bite of the river air and a feeling of being watched. In the weeks and months before the collapse, local police and residents reported an increase in sightings not only of the Mothman itself, but of unusual occurrences around the bridge. Lights flickered inexplicably, shadows moved against the steel girders in ways that defied logic, and those who drove across the bridge at night described an overwhelming sense of dread pressing down upon them. Some claimed their vehicles felt unusually heavy as they crossed, as though some invisible force were resisting their passage. Others felt their hearts pound and their hands shake without explanation. When the bridge finally gave way, many residents recalled the eerie coincidences with a chilling clarity. They remembered the nights when the creature had appeared, when its red eyes had pierced the darkness, and when the air around the bridge had seemed to vibrate with a subtle, unnatural tension. Survivors and witnesses alike began to connect the dots, wondering if the Mothman had been more than a passive observer. Was he a warning sent to the town? Or had his presence somehow been intertwined with the disaster itself, an omen of death that none could ignore? The aftermath was devastating. Rescue crews struggled against the freezing current to recover bodies, while families of the victims grappled with incomprehensible grief. News of the collapse spread quickly across the nation, and reporters flocked to Point Pleasant, eager to document the tragedy. It was then that the stories of the Mothman surfaced in earnest. Locals came forward with their accounts of red-eyed, winged sightings, recounting moments of terror that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now felt chillingly prophetic. Some skeptics dismissed the sightings as mass hysteria, the product of grief and fear coloring memory after the tragedy. Yet those who had seen the creature maintained their accounts, insisting that it was no mere hallucination. They described the Mothman's gaze as intelligent, purposeful, and utterly alien, leaving an impression on the mind that would not fade. Over the decades, the Silver Bridge collapse has remained synonymous with the Mothman legend. Scholars, paranormal enthusiasts, and locals alike study the events leading up to that December morning, noting the eerie pattern of sightings and the timing of the tragedy. To many, the creature was not a harbinger to be feared in a traditional sense, but a warning, a signal that catastrophe was imminent, though unheeded. Even today, the bridge, replaced by a modern structure, stands as a somber reminder of that day. Visitors report an uneasy feeling when crossing the river, as though the shadow of the Mothman still lingers, watching from some unseen perch. Nighttime crossings inspire caution, with stories of phantom wings and glowing red eyes, retold to each new generation. The legend endures because it is tied to real loss, to a tragedy that remains etched into the collective memory of Point Pleasant. The story of the Silver Bridge collapse is more than a tale of structural failure. It is a chilling intersection of human engineering, unforeseen disaster, and the inexplicable presence of something that defies understanding. The Mothman, whether messenger or omen, continues to haunt the town's history. 46 lives were lost that December morning, but for those who had glimpsed the creature in the weeks before, the terror was not in the water or the steel, it was in the knowledge that something unseen had been watching all along, waiting, perhaps, for the perfect moment to remind humanity of forces beyond comprehension. Long before the Silver Bridge collapse cast its shadow over Point Pleasant, the Ohio River had already earned a reputation for strange and unexplainable phenomena. Fishermen, night shift workers, and even passing travelers whispered about glowing orbs that hovered above the water after sunset, their eerie illumination casting pale reflections across the dark currents. These lights were unlike anything ordinary, a deep, pulsing red that seemed to shift and move with a life of its own. On some nights, the orbs would dart suddenly into the woods, disappearing among the trees, only to reappear moments later, hovering in the fog that rolled in from the river. Local residents, initially dismissing the lights as some trick of the fog or reflections from distant lamps, soon realized that there was more to the phenomenon. Fishermen returning from their nightly excursions spoke of boats that were inexplicably thrown off course by sudden gusts of wind, lights that followed them no matter where they navigated. One man swore that he had seen a shadow move in the river's reflection, massive, winged, and impossibly fast. At first, these sightings were isolated and scattered, nothing more than stories passed in hushed tones at the docks and in the town's taverns. But as the weeks went by, a pattern began to emerge, one that would eventually intertwine with the legend of the Mothman. When the first official sightings of the Mothman occurred in the nearby TNT area, the strange lights on the Ohio River intensified. Witnesses who had previously only seen orbs began reporting a figure with glowing red eyes moving in conjunction with the lights. Some described it perched on the banks, its massive wings folded like a dark cloak against the night. Others claimed to see it hovering over the water, mirroring the motion of the orbs as though controlling them. The creature's presence seemed inextricably linked to the lights, a living part of a phenomenon that defied natural explanation. On several occasions, fishermen described approaching the lights cautiously, only to feel a sudden chill pass through the air, as though the warmth of the evening had been replaced by the icy grip of something unseen. Their boats rocked as though struck by invisible hands, and shadows flitted across the water just beyond the reach of their lanterns. Those who dared to call out were met not with an answer, but with a silence so thick it seemed to press against their ears, broken only by the faint, rhythmic beating of wings far above. Some townspeople speculated that the lights were a warning, a signal of impending disaster. Others, however, feared something far more sinister. They claimed that the Mothman, in tandem with the orbs, lured people into dangerous situations. A fisherman navigating the river at night could suddenly find himself drawn toward hidden rocks or treacherous currents, unable to resist the hypnotic pull of the pulsing lights. Travelers walking along the riverbank reported feeling watched, then experiencing sudden vertigo or disorientation that forced them into accidents or near misses. In this theory, the Mothman was not merely observing, it was orchestrating, using the lights to manipulate human perception and prey upon fear itself. A particularly chilling encounter occurred in late November, weeks before the Silver Bridge tragedy. A pair of brothers, returning from a late-night fishing trip, spotted the familiar red orbs hovering above the river. At first, they thought the lights were floating lanterns, some prank of nearby townsfolk. But as they neared, the air grew unnaturally heavy, and the fog thickened unnervingly. Suddenly, a massive shape rose from the treeline, a humanoid figure with enormous wings, glowing eyes that matched the color and pulse of the orbs. The creature spread its wings, and the lights responded, darting closer, as if energized by its presence. The brothers, paralyzed by terror, barely managed to maneuver their boat away from the riverbank before they were struck by a sudden surge of wind that nearly capsized them. They later recounted the encounter to local authorities, who listened politely but skeptically. Over time, the Ohio River lights became a crucial element in the Mothman lore. Researchers and paranormal investigators noted that sightings of the lights almost always coincided with reports of the creature itself. In many accounts, the red eyes of the Mothman seemed to synchronize with the pulsing glow, creating an unnerving impression that the being and the lights were part of a single entity. Some theorists speculated extraterrestrial involvement, suggesting that the Mothman might be a sentinel or scout, and that the lights were signals, experiments, or markers designed to manipulate perception. Others preferred a more metaphysical explanation, that the lights were a manifestation of fear or death, drawn to the creature and amplified by its presence. Even decades later, locals insist that the river remains haunted by both phenomena. Visitors have reported seeing the red orbs flicker across the water on moonless nights, accompanied by the sensation of being watched by something immense and intelligent. The stories persist, whispered along docks and at riverbank picnics, always carrying a warning. Those who encounter the lights should be wary, for the Mothman is rarely alone, and danger often follows in his wake. The Ohio River lights are more than a curious anomaly. They are a reminder that the world often holds shadows beyond comprehension, that creatures may exist beyond the limits of reason, and that sometimes the night itself conspires to teach humanity the meaning of fear. Where the lights dance, some say the Mothman waits, watching and judging, a harbinger of doom whose presence is signaled by a crimson glow over the river. For those who have seen it, the experience lingers like a cold wind through the solar, warning that some legends, once encountered, cannot be forgotten. Long before the Mothman first appeared in the decaying TNT area, the land around Point Pleasant carried an older, darker history. Centuries before automobiles, bridges, and townsfolk populated the area, this was Shawnee territory, rich with forests, rivers, and wildlife. Chief Cornstalk, a respected leader, presided over the Shawnee people with wisdom and courage. But the arrival of European settlers brought tension, betrayal, and violence. In the late 1700s, Cornstalk faced a grim fate. Despite attempts at diplomacy, he and his people were increasingly encroached upon, trapped by lies and broken promises. The settlers, fearing the Shawnee and desiring more land, lured Cornstalk under a false pretense of peace. On the banks of the Kanawha River, near what would one day become Point Pleasant, he was murdered. Witnesses claimed his final words were more than a plea, they were a curse. With his dying breath, Chief Cornstalk vowed that the land would never know peace, that sorrow and tragedy would haunt the descendants of those who had wronged his people. For generations, the curse seemed dormant, lying beneath the soil and the river fog, a story whispered by elders to children. But locals always sensed something unusual about the land. Crops sometimes failed inexplicably. Strange accidents occurred near the river, and travelers reported odd, unsettling sightings in the forests. People joked that the spirits of the Shawnee still walked there, though most dismissed the idea as superstition. Then, in the 1960s, the world was introduced to the Mothman. The first sightings began in 1966 near the TNT area, a site already imbued with local unease. Residents reported a towering winged figure with glowing red eyes appearing along the roads and in the shadows of abandoned structures. Panic spread, fueled by repeated sightings, and the legend quickly took hold. Locals began to draw connections between the creature and the centuries-old curse of Chief Cornstalk. Perhaps this was no ordinary monster. Perhaps the Mothman was the embodiment of Cornstalk's vengeance, a sentinel sent to remind the world that betrayal and violence against his people would not go unanswered. The connection seemed undeniable when tragedy struck. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people and leaving the town in shock. The timing of the disaster, coming shortly after the surge of Mothman sightings, seemed almost too precise to be mere coincidence. Residents and paranormal enthusiasts speculated that Chief Cornstalk's curse had awakened, channeling its wrath through the Mothman. In this interpretation, the creature was not merely a harbinger of doom, it was the curse made flesh, the tangible form of centuries-old anger and grief finally manifesting. Stories from the town reinforced the theory. Truckers reported seeing a large, winged figure perched on the beams of the Silver Bridge in the weeks leading up to the collapse. its red eyes burning like warnings in the night. Fishermen on the Ohio River spoke of mysterious, glowing lights pulsing in sync with sightings of the creature. Those who encountered it felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though some ancient, malevolent will had awakened to judge and punish. Point Pleasant itself seemed under a shadow. Families experienced sudden misfortunes, businesses suffered unexplained losses, and accidents occurred without clear cause. Elderly townsfolk quietly remarked that the land was cursed, that the Mothman's arrival was merely the fulfillment of a centuries-old prophecy. The idea of Cornstalk's vengeance offered a lens through which these inexplicable events could be understood. To them, the creature was no random anomaly. It was history catching up with the present, an echo of an injustice that could not be erased. Even those skeptical of supernatural explanations could not ignore the pattern. The frequency of sightings, coupled with the timing of disasters, created a chilling narrative. The Mothman's presence preceded tragedy, and his appearance was always tied to the land near Point Pleasant, the very same soil once steeped in the betrayal of Chief Cornstalk. Generations of wrongdoing seemed to have left a scar upon the earth, and the Mothman was its most visible expression. Some theorists have suggested that the curse is not limited to Point Pleasant alone. Stories of winged figures, glowing eyes, and unnatural phenomena appear in distant locations, often coinciding with accidents, disasters, or unexplained deaths. Perhaps Cornstalk's anger was too vast to be contained, his influence stretching beyond what humans could comprehend. The Mothman, then, is merely one vessel among many for a centuries-old vengeance that refuses to rest. Today, the town of Point Pleasant embraces its legend with a mixture of pride, fear, and respect. The Mothman Festival, the statues, and the countless retellings of the sightings serve as reminders that the creature is more than folklore. It is history, fear, and the tangible echo of a curse. Locals still speak quietly of Cornstalk, cautioning visitors about the land and the shadows that linger there. They warn that the Mothman may appear without warning, and that his presence is a sign that the past has not forgotten, that justice, or vengeance, still lingers in the forests, along the riverbanks, and in the hearts of those who dwell near the cursed soil. Some say the Mothman is an omen, others a guardian. But for many in Point Pleasant, he is the living manifestation of Chief Cornstalk's curse, reminder that the weight of history, betrayal, and unresolved injustice can shape the present in terrifying and unexplainable ways. The curse endures, carried on enormous, shadowed wings, with red eyes that pierce through time and memory, warning all who would dare ignore the lessons of the past. The old power plant on the outskirts of Point Pleasant had always carried an air of unease. By the 1960s, the massive structure was long abandoned, a relic of a bygone industrial era. Its concrete walls were cracked and pitted, windows shattered or boarded over, and the metal pipes groaned and creaked in the night like the sighs of some great, unseen beast. Locals whispered about the place in hushed tones, warning children and teenagers to stay away. Yet that warning only seemed to make the power plant more alluring to the town's youth. It became a rite of passage for daring teenagers. Groups would gather at the edge of the overgrown lot, daring one another to slip inside through the gaping windows or the corroded doors. Most returned quickly, unnerved by the oppressive darkness, the smell of rust and decay, and the occasional sound that seemed far too deliberate to be random. But some came back pale, shaking, their eyes wide with stories that would chill even the bravest listener. One boy, only 14 at the time, swore he had seen something massive move along the ceiling of one of the main halls. Its wings stretched across the room, filling the space with shadow. The movement was fluid, yet unnatural, almost like it was gliding rather than walking. He claimed he could feel its gaze, even though the creature's glowing red eyes were fixed somewhere just out of reach. The memory of those eyes haunted him for weeks afterward, and he refused to return to the plant, no matter how much his friends teased him. Another group told of a similar encounter. As they crept through the plant's labyrinth of catwalks and stairwells, one boy glanced toward a corner and froze. Two red orbs glowed from the shadows, unblinking, Unyielding, he claimed he could hear the faint rustle of wings even in the still air, the soft scraping of claws against concrete. Panic overcame him, and he bolted toward the exit, leaving the others to follow in a rush of terrified whispers and stumbling footsteps. For years, these tales were dismissed as overactive imaginations, until the night watchman began his rounds. The night watchman, an older man named Samuel Griggs, had worked security in Point Pleasant for decades. One night, as he performed his routine inspection of the crumbling power plant, he heard metallic footsteps echoing across the empty catwalks. At first, he assumed it was some other worker, though he knew the building had been deserted for years. He called out, his voice reverberating off the concrete walls, but no one answered. The steps continued, deliberate and measured, moving from one side of the plant to the other. The sound was heavy, almost as if the creature itself weighed more than a man. Yet Samuel saw no one. He pressed on, moving cautiously through the main floor. Shadows seemed to flicker at the corners of his vision, though when he turned his head, there was nothing. The temperature dropped inexplicably, and a cold draft brushed his face, carrying with it a faint, acrid smell, like ozone mixed with rust. Then, from a distance, he saw it. A dark shape perched near the ceiling. Wings folded, but massive, red eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Samuel froze, his heart hammering, unable to look away. The figure remained for only a moment before vanishing into the shadows, leaving only the echo of those metallic steps. In the days that followed, Samuel reported the encounter, though few believed him. Teenagers who had explored the plant corroborated his story with their own frightening experiences. They described the sensation of being watched, of an invisible force guiding their steps, and the way the shadows seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally. When the creature was near, the power plant, once merely abandoned, had become a stage for something far more sinister, a place where the Mothman had claimed a corner of the world as his own. Even outside of direct sightings, the presence of the creature seemed to influence the plant. Equipment would fail mysteriously, lights flickering without cause. Cold spots appeared in rooms that were otherwise still and undisturbed. Occasionally, workers or trespassers would hear whispers or faint rustlings, the sound of something moving just out of reach. Those who ignored the warnings often left the building shaken, their nerves frayed, insisting that the power plant had a life of its own. Locals began to connect these sightings to the broader legend of the Mothman, the same creature that had terrified the TNT area, that had been glimpsed in the woods and near the river, was now appearing inside the abandoned structure. Some theorized that the power plant's long period of decay, its isolation, and the oppressive architecture made it a natural lair or observation post for the Mothman. It was a place where he could move unseen, his red eyes cutting through darkness, wings stretching across concrete and steel, an omnipresent reminder that the world was not entirely safe, even in man-made spaces. As decades passed, the stories of the power plant became integral to the Mothman mythos. Researchers, paranormal enthusiasts, and thrill-seekers alike have returned to the site, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature. Few have reported anything conclusive, but many leave with the same sense of dread, the same memory of unseen eyes watching and wings brushing against shadows. The abandoned power plant is now a symbol of fear, of history, and of a creature that remains elusive, terrifying, and impossibly large. Even today, when the wind howls through the broken windows and the pipes groan in the night, locals say it is the Mothman moving unseen, a dark sentinel among the ruins. Its wings may not always be visible, its eyes may not always glow, but its presence is unmistakable. For those who enter the abandoned power plant, the warning is clear. Some places are not empty, and some shadows are more than they seem. In the bustling heart of Chicago, one of the busiest airports in the world became the unexpected stage for a modern Mothman encounter. In 2017, reports began flooding in from O'Hare International Airport, a place defined by lights, engines, and constant motion. Dozens of employees, ground crew, maintenance workers, and security personnel claimed to see something entirely out of place. A winged figure moving across the runways and tarmacs, darting between parked planes as though invisible to most, yet unmistakable to those who had the misfortune of spotting it. At first, management dismissed the claims as fatigue or overactive imaginations. Long hours, stress, and the chaotic environment of a major airport could easily play tricks on tired minds. Yet the reports were too numerous, too consistent, to ignore. Employees described the creature as tall, humanoid, with proportions that seemed slightly off, yet terrifyingly familiar. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, cutting through the night like twin lanterns, always watching, always moving. It was fast, almost impossibly agile, and yet it carried itself with a predatory grace that made witnesses instinctively step back or freeze in place. One ground crew worker recounted seeing the creature leap onto a jet bridge, its massive wings folding against its back as it surveyed the tarmac below. The figure's presence was so startling that it left him shaking for hours, unable to comprehend what he had witnessed. Another employee described the Mothman darting between planes, moving silently, despite the roar of engines and the buzz of machinery. Each time it appeared, it seemed to vanish as quickly as it had arrived, leaving only the lingering sense of being watched by something beyond human understanding. The sightings were not limited to one area of the airport. Several employees reported seeing the creature near luggage conveyors, maintenance hangars, and even along the perimeters of the runways. Some described the wingspan as enormous, capable of blotting out the glare of the runway lights when fully extended. Its eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed almost sentient, tracking movement and following individuals with a precision that no ordinary animal could match. The consistency of the sightings over weeks led many to believe that this was not an isolated incident, but the presence of something deliberate, calculating, and intelligent. Fear began to ripple through the workforce. Some employees refused to work night shifts altogether, citing the terror of encountering the creature in the dimly lit expanse of the airport. At 2:00 a.m. or 3:00 a.m., when the quiet hum of the airport made every shadow appear alive, pilots reported unusual disturbances as Whelan explained shadows near the tarmac, equipment misaligned, and lights blinking without cause. Although many could not definitively link these incidents to the creature, a growing number of witnesses insisted there was a connection. Investigators and journalists were drawn to the airport, eager to document what many now called the O'Hare Mothman. Cameras were set up along the perimeters of the runways and observation decks, but the creature proved elusive. In the footage that was captured, a faint shadow flitted across the tarmac, sometimes accompanied by a brief flare of red in the darkness. Many dismissed the evidence as reflections or camera artifacts. Yet employees who had experienced the sightings firsthand knew the truth. What they had seen was real, and it was terrifying. Eyewitnesses often described a pattern in its appearances. The creature seemed to prefer moments of transition when planes were landing, taxis were maneuvering, or workers were alone between the massive aircraft. It would appear suddenly, its red eyes glowing, wings stretching and folding as it moved with fluid, unnatural precision. Some theorized that it was drawn to energy, motion, or even human anxiety, manifesting at the exact moments when fear and awareness were heightened. Others suggested it might be a warning, a modern echo of legends that had haunted humanity for decades, signaling danger or disaster in places that seemed ordinary. The O'Hare sightings quickly became a topic of fascination on social media. Videos, blurry photographs, and anecdotal accounts spread rapidly, sparking debate between skeptics and believers. Some argued that the phenomenon was a product of stress, optical illusions, or overactive imagination in a hypersure work environment. Others pointed to the consistency of multiple independent reports and the undeniable terror in the witnesses' accounts as proof that something inexplicable was prowling the airport at night. For those who experienced the encounters firsthand, however, there was no doubt. The sensation of being watched by an enormous, intelligent creature left a mark that could not be erased. The red eyes, glowing in the darkness, seemed to look not just at the body but into the mind, assessing, judging, and measuring the fear it invoked. Even when the creature disappeared, its presence lingered, an invisible weight pressing on the imagination long after the tarmac had emptied. In the months following the initial sightings, the airport installed additional lighting, cameras, and security patrols. Yet reports of the winged figure continued sporadically, particularly in areas less traveled or under dim lights. It was as if the creature had adapted, learning to move in harmony with human activity, striking only when the shadows were deep enough to conceal its massive form. Employees began to share stories, warning each other to be vigilant, to avoid the corners of the runways when alone, and to respect the silent force that seemed to patrol the airport under the cover of night. The 2017 O'Hare sightings were a reminder that the Mothman legend is not confined to Point Pleasant or the Ohio River. It can appear anywhere, in modern cities and industrial landscapes, adapting to new environments while retaining the same chilling traits: massive wings, glowing red eyes, and an air of intelligence and menace. The creature's presence at O'Hare International Airport, one of the busiest hubs in the world, demonstrates that even in a place dominated by light, technology, and human activity, shadows remain, and legends never truly die. For those who saw it, the O'Hare Mothman is not just a story, it is an undeniable reality. The nights are quieter, the runways emptier, but the memory remains. A massive, humanoid figure darting between jets, red eyes glowing, wings spanning the tarmac, watching, waiting, and reminding all who encounter it that some mysteries cannot be explained, only feared. From 2011 to 2020, Chicago found itself gripped by a series of sightings that would unsettle even the most skeptical residents. Beyond the chaos of O'Hare Airport, the city became a strange hunting ground for a winged humanoid that defied explanation. Reports came from rooftops, highways, and even the shores of Lake Michigan, painting a picture of a creature that seemed to move freely across the urban landscape, always observing, always just out of reach. Witnesses described the figure that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, towering in height, with wings that stretched wide enough to blot out streetlights. The creature moved with a fluid grace, sometimes perching silently atop a building, other times swooping low over highways, startling drivers and pedestrians alike. Its eyes, glowing red in the dark, seemed to pierce through the city's chaos, locking onto individuals as though they were being weighed and measured. There was an intelligence in those eyes, a deliberate and knowing presence that made people instinctively shiver, sensing something far beyond natural comprehension. The first sighting in 2011 came from a late-night construction worker on the west side. As he navigated the scaffolding of an unfinished skyscraper, he noticed a massive shadow swoop across the neighboring rooftops. At first, he thought it was a crane or some kind of equipment, but then, red eyes met his gaze, and the shadow unfolded massive wings, briefly filling the night sky before vanishing. Shaken, he shared the story with coworkers, but most dismissed it as fatigue or exaggeration. Yet similar reports began to emerge across the city, too frequent and too consistent to ignore. Over the following months, sightings spread to the city's highways. Drivers reported a sudden figure darting across overpasses and median strips, wings slicing through the darkness, often forcing motorists to swerve in panic. Some motorists claimed they felt a pressing weight in the air, a cold gust that seemed to emanate from the creature itself, pressing down on their cars as if warning them of impending doom. Police records show multiple accidents occurring in conjunction with these sightings, though many officers never linked the incidents publicly to the creature. Witnesses, however, were unanimous. The presence of the winged figure preceded these moments of chaos. Lake Michigan became another focal point of the sightings. Joggers along the lakefront reported seeing a dark silhouette hovering over the water just above the waves, sometimes gliding silently along the shoreline, other times swooping over piers and boats. Kayakers and night fishermen told tales of glowing red eyes reflecting in the black waters, leaving them paralyzed with fear. The creature seemed to appear wherever the city's lights met the darkness, occupying the threshold between human civilization and the natural world, a phantom impossible to categorize. Residents began calling the phenomenon the Chicago Phantom, though many quickly noted that the description matched the classic Mothman legend, a towering, winged figure with glowing red eyes, appearing before accidents, disasters, or moments of inexplicable terror. Social media amplified the sightings, spreading images, blurry videos, and first-hand accounts across the internet, while skeptics suggested drones, hoaxes, or misidentified birds. The sheer number of independent, consistent reports left many experts baffled. The creature's behavior seemed intentional, almost ritualistic, appearing at specific times and places, often where human activity intersected with shadowed or elevated areas. The Chicago Wave, as researchers later termed it, spanned nearly a decade. Over 50 sightings were officially recorded, but locals suggest the number is far higher. Reports varied in detail, but shared common traits: massive wings, red eyes, a humanoid form, and an air of intelligence and foreboding. In some accounts, the creature would remain for only a few moments, vanishing into the night before anyone could approach. In others, witnesses describe being followed across streets or along rooftops, the red eyes tracking movement as the Mothman glided silently above, always keeping pace without making a sound. A few encounters bordered on the supernatural. One night, a group of teenagers saw the creature hovering above a high-rise parking garage. When one of them attempted to take a photo, the flash briefly illuminated the figure, revealing wings that seemed impossibly long and a body that radiated shadow. The moment the flash faded, the creature had vanished, leaving behind only a faint metallic echo, as if it had brushed against the steel beams of the building in its passage. The teens later reported nightmares, waking to find the sensation of wings brushing against them in the darkness. Experts in folklore and cryptozoology were intrigued. Some theorized that the Chicago Mothman was a continuation of the Point Pleasant sightings, appearing in a different city and adapting to a modern, urban environment. Others suggested that it might be an entirely new entity, drawn to human activity, bright lights, and high-energy locations. Regardless of its origin, the Chicago Wave reinforced the sense that the Mothman phenomenon is not confined to rural West Virginia. It can manifest anywhere, a shadowy presence moving among cities, suburbs, and industrial landscapes alike. For those who encountered the creature firsthand, the experience was transformative. Many reported lingering fear, a sense that the world was not as safe as it appeared, and a heightened awareness of the spaces where shadows could hide something alive and intelligent. The red eyes, in particular, left a permanent impression, burning into memory as a symbol of foreboding that could strike anywhere at any time. Even today, Chicago residents recall the sightings with a mixture of awe and dread. The Chicago Wave may have ebbed after 2020, but the stories persist, whispered among commuters, shared online, and recounted by those who still swear they saw something impossible gliding over rooftops or hovering silently over the lake. Whether called the Chicago Phantom or the Mothman, the creature left an indelible mark on the city, reminding all who saw it that darkness can exist even in the brightest urban centers, and that some legends refuse to remain confined to the past. The Chicago Wave is a testament to the enduring terror and mystery of the Mothman. Across nearly a decade, it proved that the creature adapts, survives, and continues to haunt human perception, an ever-present shadow with red eyes and massive wings, capable of inspiring both fear and fascination wherever it appears. In April 1986, the world's attention was drawn to a small town in northern Ukraine, where the Chernobyl nuclear power plant sat at the center of an unfolding catastrophe. The reactor's eventual meltdown would leave the surrounding region uninhabitable for decades, a testament to human error and technological failure. Yet long before the explosion, before the alarms, and before the chaos that would grip the globe, workers at the plant reported sightings of something entirely unexplainable. It began subtly at first. Operators working late-night shifts on the reactor floors noticed fleeting shadows in the corridors. Some dismissed them as tricks of the fluorescent lights or the result of fatigue. But when multiple employees began reporting the same phenomenon independently, the stories could no longer be ignored. According to witnesses, the creature was massive, easily dwarfing a human in both height and breadth. Its wings, black and seemingly endless, stretched wide enough to blot out the industrial lights when it took flight. Most unsettling of all were its eyes glowing red, unblinking and piercing, as if they could see into the very thoughts of those who dared meet its gaze. The first formal report came from a senior technician who worked near the reactor's cooling towers. He described seeing the creature perched atop one of the smokestacks, its wings folded against its shadowed body. At first, he assumed it was a large bird, perhaps a raptor drawn to the heat and movement of the plant, but its proportions were wrong. Its size, the shape of its head, the glowing eyes, it was unlike anything he had ever seen. He watched in silent horror as the figure unfurled its wings and glided across the complex, moving with a speed and precision that defied natural explanation. The technician's hands shook as he recounted the sighting to colleagues, who initially laughed it off as a hallucination caused by stress. Soon, more reports surfaced. Maintenance workers on the rooftops described the same figure hovering over reactors and assembly halls, sometimes perching on beams or railings, as if it were surveying the plant. Security personnel, patrolling the perimeter at night, spoke of its sudden appearances and disappearances. Some claimed the creature seemed to anticipate their movements, always appearing in their line of sight, yet never making a sound. In the echoing emptiness of the plant at night, even the faintest flutter of wings felt monumental, like a warning carried on the wind. The sightings became more sinister in tone. Some employees reported receiving phone calls late at night from numbers they did not recognize, hearing distorted voices whispering unintelligible words. Others suffered vivid, shared nightmares of the black-winged creature. In these dreams, it hovered above them, its red eyes burning, wings spread wide, as the plant itself shook and groaned. As the days progressed toward April 26th, the creature's appearances became more frequent and more brazen. Staff working in the control room noticed shadows moving across walls and equipment when no one else was present. Some said it glided along the catwalks overlooking the reactor chambers, its eyes reflecting the glow of control panels and alarms. Others claimed to see it perched directly on the reactor itself, wings folded but tense, as though it were waiting, watching, and aware of the events yet to unfold. The timing of these sightings has intrigued paranormal researchers ever since. Many believe that the creature was a harbinger, appearing in the weeks before the meltdown as a warning that disaster was imminent. Others argue that it may have been drawn to the intense energy of the reactor, the radiation somehow manifesting or attracting a being beyond human comprehension. Regardless of the theory, those who witnessed it described the same feeling, a pressing dread, a tangible awareness of an approaching catastrophe that could not be escaped. Even after the explosion, the stories did not cease. Evacuees and cleanup workers spoke of fleeting shadows in the abandoned control rooms, black wings gliding through the corridors, and red eyes glowing in the ruins. Though some attributed these sightings to radiation-induced hallucinations, the consistency of the reports across decades suggests something far stranger. Photographs and amateur videos occasionally capture unexplained flashes or silhouettes. Though no clear evidence has ever been produced, folklorists and cryptozoologists have since compared the Chernobyl creature to the Mothman sightings in West Virginia. Both are winged, humanoid figures with glowing red eyes, appearing as omens before large-scale disasters. The parallels are striking. The Mothman preceded the collapse of the Silver Bridge, while this creature appeared before one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. Both legends are intertwined with fear, forewarning, and a sense of intelligence behind the seemingly random appearances. To this day, the abandoned Chernobyl site remains a place of fear and fascination. Tourists, scientists, and urban explorers report an unnerving sensation, an almost palpable presence that seems to linger among the ruins. Some claim to have seen glimpses of the black-winged creature, even decades later, as if it still haunts the irradiated landscape, waiting silently, wings spread, red eyes glowing, a sentinel of disaster. The Chernobyl creature, whether a supernatural warning, an extraterrestrial entity, or a manifestation of collective fear, remains a haunting symbol of the disaster. It is a reminder that some forces cannot be predicted, controlled, or explained. The workers who first saw it in 1986 knew the terror of the unknown firsthand. and their experiences served as a chilling testament to the mysteries that lurk just beyond human understanding. The legend endures, carried forward by the shadows of the abandoned plant and the whispered testimonies of those who encountered it. In the silence of the reactors, beneath the decaying structures and twisted metal, it is said the Chernobyl creature waits still, a black-winged omen, watching, warning, and haunting the landscape that it once marked before the world knew true devastation. In March 2011, Japan faced one of its most devastating natural disasters, as a massive earthquake and tsunami triggered the meltdown of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Yet, long before the alarms sounded and the reactors failed, a series of mysterious sightings had unnerved the locals. Residents, truck drivers, and even plant workers reported a strange, winged figure moving unnaturally near the facility, a silent sentinel that seemed to presage the disaster that was about to strike. The earliest reports came from truck drivers delivering supplies to the plant. Several men described a humanoid shape hovering above the roads and surrounding forests in the days before the earthquake. It was dark, almost entirely black, with enormous wings folded against its back. Its eyes glowed red, cutting through the morning mist like twin lanterns. The drivers recalled the sensation of being watched, an almost suffocating awareness that the figure could see into their very minds. Some of them slowed their trucks instinctively, convinced the creature was warning them, while others sped up, gripped by fear they could not explain. Fishermen along the Pacific coast also reported unnerving sightings. From small boats bobbing in the early morning waves, they noticed a presence in the fog above the water. Red eyes glimmered through the mist, and wings spread wide, gliding silently over the shoreline. Many thought at first it was a large bird, perhaps a heron or eagle, disturbed by the rising tide. Yet the proportions, the way it moved, and the intensity of the eyes convinced them it was something far stranger. Some fishermen claimed that their nets became tangled inexplicably. Their compasses spun without reason, and electronic equipment aboard their vessels malfunctioned whenever the figure appeared nearby. Inside the Fukushima plant, workers also began noticing disturbances. Shadowy forms passed across high windows where no one should have been, moments of darkness that vanished as soon as anyone tried to focus on them. Equipment would flicker or fail briefly, lights dimming or flickering in sync with the movements of the shadows. Security personnel reported hearing soft, metallic sounds echoing through the corridor's footsteps, or wings brushing against the steel catwalks. Though no human or animal could be seen, the atmosphere in the plant grew tense, a sense of unseen eyes monitoring every action, waiting, observing. As the days drew closer to the earthquake and tsunami, sightings intensified. Multiple independent witnesses described the same behavior, the figure appearing near energy sources, reactors, and roads, its glowing eyes scanning, wings spreading and folding with almost deliberate precision. Some theorized that the creature, like the Mothman of Point Pleasant, was a harbinger of disaster, appearing before catastrophic events to warn or simply to mark the site. Others speculated that the unusual energy being released from the plant, combined with the atmospheric conditions, may have drawn or manifested the entity. Whatever the explanation, the consistency of the reports was undeniable. Many locals spoke of a palpable dread in the area, a heaviness in the air they could not explain. Dogs refused to leave their owners' sides. Birds circled overhead nervously, and electronics behaved erratically. It was as if the winged figure brought an aura of unease, a signal that the ordinary world was about to collide with forces beyond human control. People who encountered the figure described an instinctive knowledge. Something catastrophic was coming, though none could pinpoint exactly what bit. In the immediate aftermath of the earthquake and tsunami, attention shifted to the human and environmental toll of the disaster, and the sightings largely faded from public awareness. Yet those who had seen the creature never forgot it. Survivors reported nightmares, visions of red eyes piercing the darkness, and a sense of being followed or observed long after leaving the area. Truck drivers recounted the eerie sensation of wings brushing against their vehicles in the foggy morning light. Fishermen remembered the glow on the water, and plant workers continued to feel that lingering presence among the ruins and debris. Some researchers drew parallels between the Fukushima sightings and previous Mothman legends, particularly the events surrounding the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 and the Point Pleasant Silver Bridge collapse in 1967. In each case, a large, winged humanoid with red eyes appeared prior to human or technological catastrophe. The similarities were uncanny. The creature's silent observation, its sudden appearances and disappearances, and the aura of foreboding that accompanied it all mirrored the behaviors reported in past Mothman encounters. Many began to refer to it as the Fukushima Mothman, suggesting that the phenomenon transcends geography and culture, appearing wherever disaster and energy converge. Eyewitness accounts from Fukushima emphasized the intelligence of the figure. It was not random. It appeared to monitor, follow, and perhaps even communicate warnings in a way that humans could feel, but not fully comprehend. Some theorists believe that the creature acts as a bridge between human perception and unseen forces, an omen meant to prepare those who are sensitive enough to notice. Others see it as a manifestation of fear itself, drawn to the energy and tension created by impending disaster. Even today, visitors to the Fukushima exclusion zone report unusual sensations. Shadows moving at the edge of vision, sudden cold spots, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Some claim to have glimpsed a massive, winged figure in the distance, red eyes glowing through the mist. Though these sightings are rare, the legacy of the Fukushima Mothman endures. A chilling reminder that history has a way of repeating itself, and that some warnings are written not in words, but in shadowed wings and piercing eyes. The Fukushima warnings are a testament to the enduring mystery of winged humanoid phenomena. Across decades and continents, creatures with glowing red eyes appear before disaster, leaving a trail of fear, foreboding, and unexplainable encounters. In March 2011, in the shadow of one of the world's worst nuclear disasters, the presence of such a creature reminded those who saw it that some forces exist beyond human understanding. Warning of calamity with silent wings and eyes that see far more than the human mind can fathom. In the wake of the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant during the late 1960s, the terror was not limited to visual encounters. For some, the menace appeared over the telephone, a medium that should have been safe, familiar, and ordinary. Yet countless residents reported receiving strange calls in the days and weeks following sightings of the winged humanoid with glowing red eyes. The phenomena were as unnerving as the creature itself, if not more so, because they invaded the safety of home and workplace, entering spaces where people should have felt secure. The calls were often preceded by static, the kind that crackled and hissed over old rotary lines, the interference lingering like a shadow in the room. At first, many believed it was simply a malfunction, a coincidence, the result of the aging telephone network. But then the voices began. Sometimes, they were whispers, low and mechanical, carrying tones that seemed unnatural. Other times, the lines fell completely silent, yet the caller was still there, leaving the faint but unmistakable sound of wings flapping in the distance. Those who listened closely claimed that they could hear the soft brushing of feathers, as if the Mothman itself were perched just beyond the reach of human perception. The content of the calls was disturbing. Some whispered threats, cryptic warnings, or nonsensical phrases and voices that sounded half human, half machine. "He comes," one voice rasped. "Your town will crumble. Watch the bridge." Others repeated strange symbols or strings of letters that made no sense, as though attempting to communicate in a language that existed outside of human comprehension. Some recipients, unable to understand the warnings, reported a sense of doom so profound that it left them unable to sleep, haunted by the faint, constant presence of those invisible wings. Among the most famous recipients of these ominous calls was Mary Heyer, a reporter who covered the Mothman extensively. Mary had spent countless hours documenting sightings, interviewing witnesses, and recording first-hand accounts of the winged creature. Her work earned her both admiration and fear, for she seemed to have penetrated some aspect of the mystery that others could not. Shortly after her investigations began, she started receiving strange phone calls. Dozens of them over the course of several months. According to her notes, the calls followed a pattern. They would arrive late at night, often after she had spoken to witnesses or published new reports. The voice on the other end was low, metallic, and almost inhuman. Occasionally, it would speak directly to her, uttering fragmented warnings. Do not look. The eyes see, it waits. Other times, the call consisted entirely of static, punctuated by the sound of distant, powerful wing beat. Mary recorded what she could, but no one could decipher the coded messages or identify the source. The calls, she wrote, felt less like communication and more like a deliberate warning from a force beyond human understanding. Many in Point Pleasant believed that the calls were a manifestation of the Mothman itself, a way for the creature to extend its influence beyond the physical realm. Unlike sightings in the woods or along the river, the phone calls allowed it to infiltrate private spaces, to enter homes and minds, leaving psychological scars that were as real as physical encounters. People reported sleepless nights, paranoia, and an overwhelming sense of being watched long after the line went dead. Some claimed that the calls always seemed to arrive before disasters or accidents, reinforcing the idea that the Mothman was not merely a monster, but a harbinger, a warning that tragedy was imminent. Mary Hyer's story is perhaps the most chilling. By 1970, after years of research and countless mysterious calls, she died suddenly under circumstances that many consider suspicious. Some locals whispered that she had learned too much, that her close encounters with the Mothman or her knowledge of its warnings had made her a target. Others speculated that the stress and terror from the incessant phone calls may have contributed to her untimely death. In any case, her passing reinforced the aura of fear surrounding the Mothman, proving that the creature's influence extended beyond the woods, bridges, and streets of Point Pleasant, and into the very fabric of daily life. The phenomenon of the calls was not limited to Mary Hyer. Dozens of other residents reported similar experiences, though few dared to speak publicly for fear of ridicule. People described the same characteristics: the static, the mechanical tone, the sudden silence, followed by wing beats, and, in some cases, direct threats or warnings. For witnesses, the calls were more terrifying than any physical encounter. In a face-to-face sighting, there was a chance to escape, to flee, or to hide. Over the phone, the Mothman could reach them anywhere, invading homes, offices, or hotel rooms, making privacy impossible and leaving an indelible mark of fear. Paranormal researchers have long debated the purpose of these calls. Some suggest they are a psychic projection of the Mothman's presence, an attempt to warn or terrify humans from a distance. Others argue that they may be part of a larger pattern, evidence that the creature has an intelligence capable of manipulating technology and perception. Regardless of the explanation, the phone calls remain an enduring part of the Mothman legend, demonstrating that encounters with the creature are not always visible, but always invasive, always unnerving. Even decades later, the ominous phone calls are referenced by modern cryptozoologists and paranormal investigators. They serve as a chilling reminder that the Mothman is more than a local legend. Its reach extends beyond the forests and rivers of Point Pleasant, into the very means by which people communicate and perceive the world. A simple phone line, once a tool of connection, became a conduit for fear, a way for the Mothman to make itself known without ever appearing in person. For those who experienced it firsthand, the calls were terrifying, unforgettable, and deeply personal. They were a warning, a message, and a mystery, all at once, proof that the Mothman's presence was not limited to what could be seen, but could also be heard, felt, and feared in ways that defied rational explanation. The crackling lines, the mechanical whispers, the heavy wing beats, they were as real as any sighting, as lasting as the memory of red eyes glowing in the night, and as chilling as the knowledge that some messages are meant to be feared, not understood. In September 1985, Mexico City faced one of the deadliest earthquakes in modern history. Buildings swayed, streets cracked, and thousands of lives were lost in the chaos that followed. But in the weeks leading up to the disaster, the city experienced an unusual and terrifying phenomenon. Residents reported seeing a massive winged humanoid creature stalking the streets, rooftops, and power lines. Its appearance was both eerie and consistent, leaving a trail of unease that many still remember to this day. Street vendors were among the first to notice the strange figure. Many reported seeing it perched on rooftops along the crowded avenues, its massive wings folded tightly against a dark, humanoid frame. Its eyes glowed red in the dim light of early morning or late evening, piercing through the urban haze like twin warning beacons. Vendors spoke of a feeling that they were being watched long before they saw it, a sensation that made them uneasy, distracted, and alert to every shadow around them. Some claimed that the creatures seemed to follow them silently as they carried their goods, hopping from rooftop to rooftop or gliding between buildings with an unnerving grace. Taxi drivers began reporting similar encounters while navigating the chaotic streets of the sprawling city. They would notice something darting along the edges of their visions, sometimes just a fleeting shadow, sometimes a full, massive figure with glowing red eyes. Drivers claimed the creature appeared to track their movement, maintaining a constant distance as if riding invisible currents of wind between the buildings. The presence of the winged humanoid unnerved drivers, and in a few cases, accidents occurred as a result. The creature never struck anyone physically, yet its mere presence induced fear powerful enough to alter behavior. Children were particularly affected, claiming they had seen a birdman outside their bedroom windows. Some said the creature hovered in the dark, wings stretched wide, while its eyes glowed ominously. Parents dismissed the claims at first, attributing them to nightmares or overactive imaginations. Yet, as reports multiplied across neighborhoods, it became clear that these were not isolated incidents. Children who lived blocks apart described the same figure with astonishingly similar details. Massive wings, a humanoid body, and eyes that glowed red, piercing through darkness and fog alike. The sightings were not limited to individuals. Groups of residents, walking home from work or waiting at bus stops, reported seeing the creature perched on power lines or rooftops, wings folded but tense, as though anticipating some event. It seemed to prefer high vantage points, giving it a commanding view of the city below. Eyewitnesses noted that it moved silently, gliding rather than flapping, and always disappeared before anyone could approach. In some cases, multiple people simultaneously saw the figure, reinforcing the sense that this was no hallucination, but an actual, tangible presence. Researchers and folklorists have drawn parallels between these sightings and other Mothman legends, particularly the events surrounding Point Pleasant in West Virginia. The descriptions matched closely: a winged humanoid, glowing red eyes, and a pattern of appearances that coincided with impending disasters. The Mexico City sightings occurred weeks before the devastating 1985 earthquake, suggesting that, like the Point Pleasant Mothman, this creature may serve as an omen, a harbinger of catastrophe. Street cameras and early amateur photographs from the era captured fleeting glimpses of shadows, winged silhouettes that could barely be distinguished from the urban background. While skeptics dismissed these images as birds, reflections, or photographic artifacts, those who had encountered the creature firsthand insisted they knew what they had seen. It was far larger than any bird, moved unnaturally, and seemed to possess intelligence, observing and tracking without the behavior of ordinary animals. The psychological impact on residents was profound. Fear lingered in neighborhoods where the creature had been seen. Vendors reported sleepless nights, worrying that it might appear again. Taxi drivers felt a chill on the streets, even in the warmth of September. Children remained fearful, refusing to sleep near windows or venture out after dusk. The creature's presence was subtle yet pervasive, a silent force that communicated its warning through sight and sensation alone. Some locals theorized that the winged figure was a supernatural being, a spirit of warning sent to protect the city by forewarning residents of disaster. Others believed it was a cryptid, an unknown species that appeared in the presence of large-scale calamities. Regardless of origin, the accounts were consistent. The creature was always near elevated structures, always watched humans from a distance, and always vanished without a trace, leaving only unease and a lingering sense of impending doom. In the days following the earthquake, when destruction became visible across the city, many residents revisited their sightings in disbelief. Could the figure have been trying to warn them? Had the glowing red eyes and immense wings been a desperate message, a premonition they were too unprepared to heed? The connection between the appearances and the disaster cemented the creature's place in Mexico City folklore. A mysterious presence whose timing, appearance, and eerie intelligence could not be ignored. Even decades later, the legend persists. Urban explorers, journalists, and folklorists recount tales of the winged figure of Mexico City. Its red eyes glowing in memory as vividly as they did in 1985. Some claim it still appears on rooftops at night, following the wind currents. Observing the streets, a silent sentinel whose wings span both space and legend. The story serves as a chilling reminder. Disasters often come with omens, and sometimes those omens are not easily explained, existing in shadow, in flight, and in the piercing gaze of eyes that seem to see far more than humans ever could. The Mexico City sightings of 1985 remain one of the most intriguing modern examples of winged humanoid phenomena. From street vendors, to taxi drivers, to frightened children, countless witnesses describe the same impossible figure, a presence that predicted tragedy and left an enduring mark on the city's collective memory. It was a warning, a shadow, and a mystery proof that sometimes legends arrive before disaster. Wings spread wide, eyes glowing red, silently observing the world below. In the quiet, rural farmlands of Iowa during the 1970s, a new kind of terror began to creep into the lives of those who worked the fields and lived among the endless rows of corn. Farmers and locals spoke in hushed tones about a winged creature that seemed to appear when the sun dipped below the horizon. Stalking the cornfields in the dead of night, its presence was whispered about at kitchen tables and in barns, yet few were brave enough to venture out and see it for themselves. The earliest reports were simple. At first, shadows glimpsed, moving through the stalks, strange rustling noises that carried through the windless nights, and a feeling of being watched. One farmer, returning from tending livestock, claimed he saw two red eyes glowing from the darkness between the rows of corn. The eyes seemed too large and too precise to belong to any known animal, and they followed his movement as he hurried back to the farmhouse. He described the creature as tall, with wings folded against a shadowy body that made it almost invisible in the night. He tried to dismiss it as a trick of the moonlight or fatigue, but the sense of being observed lingered for weeks. Another farmer shared a more dramatic encounter. One late evening, he stepped outside to check on his barn and froze in disbelief. A massive shadow passed silently over the roof, blotting out the moon for a fleeting moment. Its wingspan seemed impossible, stretching wider than any bird or known flying creature. The sound of its wings, subtle yet heavy, carried over the fields, leaving him paralyzed with fear. When he finally regained the courage to move, he noticed deep, clawed imprints in the soft dirt around the barn marks, far too large for any animal native to the area. From that night onward, he avoided going near the cornfields after sunset. The most chilling story, however, came from a teenage boy living on a farm on the outskirts of a small Iowa town. One autumn evening, he set out in his truck to run errands and never returned. Hours later, his vehicle was discovered abandoned on a dirt road near the edge of a vast cornfield. The windshield had been shattered from the inside, as though something had struck it with enormous force. In the dust surrounding the truck were strange and dislodged, clawed footprints unlike any animal, measuring far larger than a human foot. The boy was never found, and locals speculated that he had been taken or dragged into the cornfield by the winged terror that haunted the area. In the weeks following the disappearance, reports of the creature increased. Farmers swore they saw a figure perched on silos or hovering above the fields, wings spread wide, red eyes glowing like twin lanterns in the darkness. Livestock were sometimes found unusually restless, and some animals went missing without explanation. Witnesses noted that the creature was active primarily at night, often appearing just as the moonlight hit the corn, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of the wind. One particularly frightening account came from a group of teenagers who dared each other to walk through the cornfields after dusk. As they ventured deeper into the rows, the air grew colder and heavier, a silence settling over the fields that was almost unnatural. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkness, moving swiftly above the corn, wings flapping with a sound like tearing canvas. The red eyes glowed, fixating on the group. They ran blindly, stumbling over roots and dirt, until they reached the safety of the road. None could explain what they had seen, but all agreed it was alive, intelligent, and far larger than any bird they had ever known. Farmers tried to rationalize the sightings. Perhaps it was an owl, a hawk, or some other animal misidentified in the dark. But the consistency of the reports, combined with the size and intelligence implied by the creature's movements, left many convinced that this was something far more sinister. Locals whispered that it might be a harbinger of disaster, a warning, or a predator drawn to human activity. Some even suggested that it could be connected to other winged humanoid sightings across the country, a manifestation of the same phenomenon that had terrified towns in West Virginia and beyond. As the years passed, the cornfield terror became part of Iowa folklore. Stories were shared around campfires, in schoolyards, and during late-night gatherings in barns. People claimed that the creature still lurked in the fields, especially in the autumn months when the corn was tall and the nights long. Its red eyes were said to pierce the darkness, a reminder that some creatures remain hidden in plain sight, watching silently, waiting for the right moment to strike or warn. Despite skepticism from outsiders, the local accounts remained chillingly consistent. The glowing red eyes, the massive wings, the intelligence implied in its movements, and the terrifying events preceding the boy's disappearance. Families who have lived on the same farmland for generations claim to have heard flapping wings in the distance and seen shadows moving above the corn at night, experiences that continue to haunt them long after the sun has risen. The cornfield terror of Iowa serves as a stark reminder that legends do not always stay confined to history books or distant towns. Sometimes they live quietly among us, in rural landscapes, under the cover of darkness, and in the shadow of ordinary life. It is a presence both unseen and unforgettable, a chilling warning that nature and, perhaps something beyond it still, holds secrets that defy human understanding. Those who venture near the cornfields at night are advised to tread carefully, for the red eyes may already be watching, and the wings may already be casting their ominous shadow across the land. The story of the cornfield terror is a haunting chapter in the ongoing legend of winged humanoid creatures. Its presence in Iowa reminds us that Mothman-like phenomena are not bound by geography, and that some encounters leave lasting marks on the memory, inspiring fear that lingers long after the creature has vanished into the night. Outside Louisville, Kentucky, a decaying bridge stretches over a dark, sluggish river. Known locally as the Bridge of Blood, it has been the site of countless car crashes, some fatal, others leaving survivors shaken to their core. For decades, locals have whispered about the strange occurrences surrounding the bridge, insisting that it is more than just a treacherous stretch of asphalt. It is a place haunted by a winged humanoid figure, a creature whose presence has inspired terror and awe in equal measure. The earliest accounts date back nearly 50 years. Drivers traveling late at night reported seeing a dark shape emerge suddenly in the middle of the bridge. Its silhouette was massive, humanoid, with wings folded tight against its body, blocking the headlights of oncoming cars. Those who glimpsed it described glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness, burning with an intelligence that made fleeing impossible without losing control. The creature did not attack physically, but its sudden appearances often forced drivers to swerve, leading to collisions, overturned vehicles, or cars plunging into the river below. One particularly chilling encounter occurred in the 1970s, when a young couple was driving home from a county fair. As they approached the bridge, the headlights caught a figure standing in the center of the road. Its red eyes locked onto them, unwavering, and the couple swerved instinctively. The car skidded over the guardrail and slammed into the riverbank, leaving them shaken but miraculously alive. They later recalled hearing the faint beat of wings above the wreckage, a sound so deep and resonant it seemed almost physical, vibrating through the metal and water around them. Truck drivers became frequent witnesses. Many traveling through rural Kentucky at night reported seeing the creature perched on the guardrails or on the bridge as support beams. Some said it seemed to watch the roads like a predator, gliding silently when approached, its wings spanning impossibly wide distances. In several cases, the truck's headlights illuminated the glowing red eyes before the vehicle shook from sudden swerving to avoid the figure. Several drivers swore the creature seemed to anticipate their movements, appearing exactly when they would have little time to react, as though it were studying human behavior and exploiting weaknesses with calculated precision. Locals soon noticed a disturbing pattern. The crashes were not random. They often occurred after multiple independent sightings of the figure, suggesting that its appearances were not merely coincidental. Some believe the bridge acts as a magnet for the creature, a site where its powers or influence manifest most strongly. Witnesses consistently describe the same traits: glowing red eyes, massive wings, silent flight, and an overwhelming sense of foreboding. Many say that the sound of wings beating above the bridge is unmistakable, a warning or a signal that catastrophe is imminent. The legend of the Bridge of Blood parallels other Mothman phenomena, most notably the events in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. In the 1960s, a winged humanoid with glowing red eyes was observed prior to the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Like the Kentucky Bridge, the Ohio River site was associated with numerous accidents and tragic deaths. Paranormal researchers and cryptozoologists have pointed to these similarities, suggesting that the creature may follow a pattern, appearing at locations that are bound to experience disaster or human tragedy. In this sense, the Bridge of Blood is not just haunted, it is a marker, a place where forewarning and doom intersect. Several witnesses report that the creature is more than just a passive observer. While it rarely makes direct contact, survivors of the crashes often describe a suffocating presence in the vehicle just before the incident. A low, resonant hum, the flicker of shadows, or the sudden pressure of wings in the air seems to precede disaster. After the events, those who live to tell the tale speak of an almost conscious malevolence, a deliberate influence guiding events toward catastrophe. In other words, the creature is not only haunting the bridge, it is interacting with it, shaping the outcomes for those unfortunate enough to be present. Photographs and amateur videos are scarce, but several blurred images purportedly show the winged figure perched atop guardrails or flitting through the night sky. Most are inconclusive, distorted by darkness or motion blur, yet eyewitness accounts are consistent enough to suggest a real entity. Even those who have never seen the creature firsthand speak of the bridge with caution, treating it as a place where the ordinary rules of safety and perception do not fully apply. Local folklore has expanded over time. The name Bridge of Blood is said to have originated from the red glow of the creature's eyes reflecting on vehicles and guardrails during accidents. Some claim the figure only appears during certain phases of the moon or on foggy nights when visibility is low, further increasing the likelihood of panic and disaster. Others insist that it can manipulate the minds of those who approach, creating a sense of false security or compelling drivers to act against their instincts. Despite skepticism from outsiders, the stories persist, passed down among residents as cautionary tales. Parents warn their children never to cross the bridge at night alone. Truck drivers plan alternate routes during late hours. Even those who have not witnessed a figure admit to feeling an uneasy tension when traveling across the bridge after dark, a sensation that has lasted for generations. The Bridge of Blood remains a dark, foreboding place, a reminder that some locations carry histories of tragedy and mystery intertwined. The winged humanoid, whether supernatural, cryptid, or something beyond human understanding, continues to haunt the asphalt and river below, its glowing red eyes serving as both warning and omen. For those who approach at night, the creature may not only be watching, it may be waiting, wings spread wide, ready to turn a routine crossing into a moment of terror and chaos, as it has done for decades. Long before Point Pleasant became synonymous with the Mothman, Houston, Texas, experienced its own eerie series of encounters in the 1950s. Residents living on the outskirts of the city began reporting a creature unlike anything they had seen before, massive winged humanoid that defied explanation. The stories spread quickly, whispered from farmhouses to local diners, painting a picture of a being that was terrifying, intelligent, and completely alien to human understanding. The earliest reports came from farmers working late in the fields. They described seeing a dark figure perched on telephone poles, silhouetted against the fading light of sunset. Its wings, enormous and black as oil, were folded tight against its humanoid frame. The creature's eyes glowed a deep, piercing red, catching the last rays of sunlight and reflecting them like twin lanterns. Many who saw it froze in fear, unable to comprehend the size or form of what they were witnessing. Its presence was so intense that it seemed to drain the color and warmth from the world around it, leaving only shadows and the beating of massive wings in the night air. Drivers reported similarly terrifying encounters. Those traveling along rural roads claimed the creature would swoop at their vehicles, forcing them to brake or swerve to avoid collision. Unlike birds or other animals, it moved with purpose and intelligence. Witnesses recalled it tracking cars, adjusting its flight to match speed and trajectory. The sensation was more than just fear. It was a deep, instinctive awareness that something inhuman was deliberately interacting with them, guiding events to some unknown end. Many of these drivers described seeing the glowing red eyes, fixated on them through windshield reflections or rearview mirrors, as if the creature were reading their every thought. One particularly chilling story came from a family living near the outskirts of Houston. Late one night, they saw the figure perched atop a telephone pole outside their home. Its wings were partially extended, casting an enormous shadow over the yard. The family's dog barked furiously, but the creature made no sound. It simply observed them with those unnerving red eyes, remaining motionless for several minutes before suddenly leaping into the air and disappearing into the darkness. The family later reported that their garden was destroyed the next morning, as if some massive force had swept through while they slept. Farmers were among the hardest hit. One man claimed that several of his livestock were found dead over the course of a week, mutilated in ways that defied explanation. There were no tracks, no signs of a predator, and no evidence that other humans had been involved. The only common thread was the sightings of the Black Birdman in the same fields during the same period. Locals speculated that the creature was responsible, though whether it was hunting for food, defending territory, or simply instilling fear remained unknown. The lack of tracks or concrete evidence added an air of mystery, suggesting a being capable of actions that eluded human detection entirely. Children were not immune to the terror. Several reported seeing the figure perched on rooftops or gliding silently above their homes at night. They described it as tall and black, with eyes that glowed like fire. Parents tried to dismiss these accounts as nightmares, but the consistency of the stories, along with corroborating adult sightings, made it clear that something unusual and dangerous was present in the outskirts of Houston. Eyewitnesses emphasized the creature's intelligence. Unlike ordinary animals, it seemed aware of human perception, appearing only when someone was likely to see it. Some claimed it followed them for hours, moving from tree to telephone pole to roof in silent pursuit. Others described it as almost calculating, waiting until a car approached before swooping down, or hovering in place long enough to terrify anyone who caught sight of it. Unlike birds, it did not make chirping sounds or calls. The only audible indication of its presence was the beating of enormous wings, a sound described as both powerful and haunting, reverberating across fields and rural roads. Researchers looking back have drawn parallels between the Texas blackbird and the Mothman of Point Pleasant. Both are humanoid, winged figures with glowing red eyes, appearing in rural or semi-rural areas just before periods of heightened danger or disaster. While the Houston encounters occurred years before the West Virginia sightings, the similarities are striking. Intelligence, foreboding behavior, and a physical presence capable of terrifying multiple witnesses simultaneously. Some suggest that these creatures, though separated by time and geography, may be manifestations of the same phenomenon, appearing where catastrophe, fear, or high energy intersects. Local legends began to grow alongside the sightings. The creature was blamed for missing livestock, unexplained shadows, and accidents on rural roads. People avoided traveling at night, especially along the outskirts where it had been seen most frequently. Even decades later, those who lived through the events recall the fear vividly, the way the red eyes would glow in the darkness, the oppressive silence that accompanied its presence, and the unsettling certainty that the creature could see far more than humans ever could. Despite skepticism from outsiders and a lack of physical evidence, the Texas blackbird remains an enduring legend. Its appearances were fleeting yet unforgettable, leaving a psychological imprint on those who saw it. The creature was never captured, photographed clearly, or harmed anyone physically in a direct confrontation, but the fear it induced was undeniable. Drivers, farmers, and families alike remember it as a harbinger of danger, a reminder that some forces cannot be explained or controlled, and that the world contains mysteries far beyond ordinary comprehension. The Texas blackbird of the 1950s serves as a chilling precursor to the more widely known Mothman sightings. Its glowing eyes, massive wings, and deliberate presence over Houston's outskirts remind us that some legends transcend time and geography. Whether an omen, a cryptid, or a supernatural manifestation, it left its mark on the city's collective memory, a silent predator whose wings cast shadows long after it vanished into the night. Those who encountered it would never forget the terror of being watched, followed, and understood by a creature that existed somewhere between legend and reality. In the frozen expanse of Siberia during the 1990s, miners working in remote tunnels began reporting strange and terrifying phenomena that defied explanation. Deep underground, where the air was thick with dust and the echo of machinery reverberated off stone walls, men claimed to hear the scraping of enormous wings. At first, they dismissed the noises as the shifting of rock or the natural sounds of the tunnels. But soon it became clear that something far stranger was at work. Miners described a presence in the darkness, a shadow larger than any human or animal, moving silently among the tunnels. Some felt unseen eyes watching them, a gaze so intense it made their skin crawl and their hearts pound. In moments of low light or smoke, a few claimed to see the figure crouched on ledges or in the shadows, wings folded against its massive body, glowing red eyes peering from the darkness like molten coals. It was humanoid, yet impossibly large, its proportions dwarfing any man or known creature. And it moved with a deliberate, almost predatory grace. The first reports were whispered in the mess halls and locker rooms, recounted over mugs of tea as miners tried to rationalize what they had seen. One veteran worker spoke of glancing down a long tunnel and seeing a dark shape perched atop a support beam, wings folded like a gargoyle, its glowing eyes fixated on him. The figure vanished before he could react, leaving only the echo of wings brushing against stone. He told his coworkers he felt as if the being had been waiting for him, observing him for some unknowable purpose. Soon, the accounts multiplied. Miners reported seeing fleeting shadows in their peripheral vision, hearing wings sweep past them in passages where no air currents existed, and feeling the oppressive weight of unseen attention. Some tried to dismiss the stories as stress, fatigue, or the mind playing tricks in the pitch-black tunnels, but the consistency of the reports made that difficult. Everyone who worked in the mines began to speak of the winged watcher, a silent presence that appeared without warning, haunting both the tunnels and the miners' thoughts. The tension escalated in the days leading up to a catastrophic collapse that would claim dozens of lives. Miners insisted that the winged figure had been there, lurking near the mouth of the tunnel, observing the workers and the machinery. Some interpreted its presence as a warning, a signal that danger was imminent, though none knew how to respond or what measures to take. The creature never physically interfered with their work, yet the sense of dread it instilled was palpable, making men uneasy, distracted, and fearful as they moved through the underground passages. When the mine partially collapsed, The devastation was swift and brutal. Tons of rock and debris fell, trapping and killing dozens. Survivors emerged, shaken and bloodied, recounting the event with disbelief and horror. Many who had witnessed a dark-winged figure before the disaster claimed that it had been a harbinger, a warning of the catastrophe that no one could escape. Some described seeing it crouched on the edges of the collapsed tunnels, as though it had been waiting for the inevitable moment when lives would be endangered. Its glowing eyes, they said, had seemed to pierce through the rock, anticipating the disaster long before humans could perceive it. Eyewitness accounts emphasized the intelligence and awareness of the creature. Unlike ordinary predators, it did not move randomly or appear opportunistically. It appeared to know the layout of the tunnels, the positions of the miners, and even the timing of their work. Some miners swore that it had followed certain individuals more closely than others, as if judging, observing, or testing them. It was silent, enigmatic, and utterly indifferent to the machinery and noise that surrounded it, appearing only when the darkness was thickest and the air most oppressive. Even those who survived the collapse found that the psychological impact persisted. Nightmares plagued them for years, with visions of massive wings unfolding in tight tunnels, glowing red eyes watching every move, and the sensation of being trapped with an unseen predator. Some avoided underground work for the rest of their lives, unable to shake the sense that the creature was still watching, still present in the shadows, and still anticipating human error. Folklorists and cryptozoologists, who later examined the accounts, noted striking similarities to other Mothman-like phenomena. Across the globe, winged humanoid figures had been reported in proximity to disasters at the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, at Fukushima, before the nuclear meltdown, and even in rural Iowa, among cornfields. The Russian mines fit this pattern perfectly. A remote, dangerous environment, a mysterious, winged figure, and a disaster that claimed multiple lives shortly after the creature's appearance. Many theorists believe that such beings act as omens, appearing before human tragedies to warn, intimidate, or simply observe. The miners' stories from Siberia stand out, not only for the vividness of the sightings, but also for the eerie intelligence attributed to the creature. It seemed more than a cryptid or supernatural entity. It was a sentinel, a harbinger, and a predator all at once, operating in a world where humans were vulnerable and unprepared. Its presence was felt as much as it was seen, a constant reminder that some phenomena cannot be contained or rationalized, and that some warnings come in forms both terrifying and incomprehensible. Even today, tales of the Russian mines persist. Investigators, journalists, and folklorists who have explored the region report similar accounts from miners in other parts of Siberia, suggesting a legacy of winged humanoid sightings tied to danger and catastrophe. While the creature has never been captured or documented with clarity, its red eyes and immense wings linger in memory, haunting both those who witnessed it and those who study its legend. The Russian mines of the 1990s serve as a chilling reminder that winged humanoid phenomena are not confined by geography. Whether cryptid, omen, or supernatural sentinel, the dark-winged figure remains a haunting presence in human consciousness, watching, waiting, and appearing when the world teeters on the edge of disaster, much like the Mothman of Point Pleasant. For those who worked the tunnels, it was a warning, an unspoken judgment, and a terror they could not escape. In the months following the Silver Bridge collapse in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a new kind of terror began stalking the state's lonely highways. Truckers and long-distance drivers, many of whom spent hours alone on the winding roads, reported seeing a winged humanoid figure tracking their movements, a presence that was as unnerving as it was inexplicable. Unlike the encounters near the TNT area or the bridge itself, these sightings occurred miles away from the town, on stretches of road where isolation made every shadow a potential threat. The first reports came from veteran truckers traveling through the Appalachian region. Many described noticing something moving in the tree line along the road. At first, it appeared as a large shadow, only vaguely humanoid, slipping between the trees with astonishing speed. Then, as headlights illuminated the area, The outline became clearer, a massive figure, 7 feet tall or more, with wings folded against its back and eyes glowing red in the darkness. Drivers reported the sensation of being watched, a feeling that intensified when the creature stepped into the open, fully visible against the night sky. Glowing eyes became a hallmark of these encounters. Truckers swore they saw them reflected in mirrors, headlights catching the red glow for just a fraction of a second before the figure disappeared into the woods. Others claimed the eyes followed their vehicles, maintaining a steady gaze as they navigated sharp curves or steep inclines. Some reported that the creature's presence caused their dogs to growl and their radios to emit static bursts, further heightening the sense that something unnatural was nearby. The wings of the creature were equally terrifying. Unlike birds or bats, they did not flap in predictable patterns. Witnesses described them as unfolding suddenly, larger than any known animal, creating shadows that stretched across the asphalt. The sound of the wings beating against the air was heavy and resonant, like metal scraping against metal, echoing across the valleys and making it impossible for drivers to ignore. The wings seemed to carry with them a sense of intent, as if the creature were able to influence the trajectory of vehicles or manipulate its environment to maintain proximity to its observers. One of the most chilling accounts came from a long-haul driver named Harold Jenkins. Driving a rig along a desolate stretch of highway late at night, he noticed a shadow moving along the roadside. At first, he thought it was a large deer, but as he approached, the figure unfolded enormous wings and stepped into the beam of his headlights. Its red eyes locked onto him, and Harold felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He reported that the figure suddenly launched into the air, gliding silently above his cab, only to land moments later on the roof of his trailer. The metal buckled slightly under the weight, causing Harold to swerve and nearly lose control of his vehicle. Heart pounding, he pulled over to inspect the roof, trembling with fear, but the creature had vanished without a trace. The only evidence left was the dented metal and the echo of wings still vibrating in his memory. Other truckers told similar stories. Some reported the figure swooping low over their cabs, passing mere feet above the highway. Others saw it perched on roadside signs or guardrails, observing them with glowing red eyes before vanishing into the darkness. A few described the creature appearing simultaneously in multiple locations along their route, as though it could move with impossible speed or manipulate perception to appear closer than it truly was. The consistency of these accounts left many truckers convinced that the creature was intelligent, aware of its audience, and possibly even interacting with them deliberately. The phenomenon came to be known among drivers as the highway stalker, a winged, humanoid presence that appeared without warning, haunting the roads long after the bridge disaster had faded from headlines. Unlike other Mothman sightings, the highway stalker was mobile, following vehicles across miles of desolate roads, showing no preference for proximity to urban centers or known disaster sites. It seemed to operate in isolation, appearing only when humans were present and retreating once they paused or attempted to confront it. The psychological impact on drivers was profound. Many reported sleepless nights, unable to shake the image of glowing red eyes reflected in mirrors or headlights, catching immense wings, slicing through the night. Some refused to drive after dark, while others took alternate routes, hoping to avoid stretches where the creature had been reported. For those who had experienced its presence firsthand, the terror was as real as the mechanical hum of their rigs, a constant reminder that some dangers cannot be predicted, avoided, or rationalized. Researchers and folklorists, who later studied these accounts, drew parallels to the original Point Pleasant Mothman sightings. They noted the similarities: humanoid form, massive wings, red eyes, and appearances prior to or following disasters. While the creature near the Silver Bridge was stationary, appearing near the TNT area and the collapsing structure itself, the highway stalker represented mobility and persistence, demonstrating that Mothman-like phenomena were not confined to one location. Its presence along rural highways suggested a broader range of influence, extending beyond towns and landmarks into the liminal spaces of the night where humans are most vulnerable. Even decades later, tales of the highway stalker endure, Truckers tell new recruits to be cautious on late-night runs, particularly in areas where tree lines crowd the road and moonlight barely penetrates the canopy. Some claim that the creature still follows vehicles, appearing only when witnesses are alone or distracted, a silent observer testing human limits. The accounts serve as both warning and legend, a reminder that the winged humanoid of West Virginia was not a single, isolated anomaly, but part of a broader pattern of mysterious, terrifying occurrences. The highway stalker remains one of the most chilling, Mothman-related phenomena, illustrating how the creature's influence extends beyond the familiar locations of Point Pleasant. It is a reminder that, sometimes, the night itself becomes a stage for fear wings unfold in darkness. Red eyes glow in mirrors, and the air vibrates with the echo of a presence that is at once both invisible and impossible to ignore. For those traveling alone on West Virginia's highways, the warning is simple. Keep your eyes on the road, because you may not be the only one watching. In the heart of Brooklyn during the early 2000s, a woman named Alina reported a sighting that would chill her to the bone and become the talk of her neighborhood. One night, she awoke to an uneasy stillness, the kind of silence that presses against the walls and makes the ordinary sounds of the city seem muted. Then, out of the quiet, she saw Ida, massive, shadowy figure, perched on the rooftop of her apartment building. Its wings were folded tight against a humanoid frame, and its red eyes glowed through the darkness, peering directly at her window. Alina froze, unsure if she was awake or trapped in some terrible nightmare. The creature remained still for several moments, seemingly observing her. Its eyes burned with an unnatural intensity, reflecting a strange intelligence and an awareness that made her feel completely exposed. The wings, enormous and black, were folded, but appeared ready to unfold at a moment's notice. Every instinct told her to run, but the terror rooted her to the spot. Finally, she screamed, a sound that shattered the quiet of the block. Within moments, neighbors rushed to their windows and balconies, drawn by her cries. That's when they saw it. Tua, dark, winged humanoid crouched against the skyline, its red eyes fixed on the city below. The figure made no sound except for the faint, almost imperceptible flapping of wings, a ghostly rhythm that echoed against brick walls and fire escapes. Then, with a sudden leap, it sprang into the night sky, wings unfolding fully, and vanished into the darkness above the city. For days afterward, the block seemed haunted. Residents reported hearing scraping noises on rooftops and along fire escapes, the soft flapping of wings overhead, and whispers that carried through the alleys in the dead of night. Dogs barked incessantly, cats hissed at empty corners, and even those who did not believe in the supernatural felt an oppressive weight pressing on the streets. Windows rattled at odd hours, as if the wind or something else was moving against the buildings, and shadows shifted unnaturally across walls and stairwells. Alina was not alone in her terror. Other residents came forward, recounting strange sightings in the weeks prior. One man described glimpsing a figure moving across rooftops while returning from a late-night subway trip. Another claimed to have seen glowing red eyes peering from a rooftop ventilation shaft, vanishing before he could react. The accounts shared a remarkable consistency: humanoid form, enormous wings, glowing eyes, and the unnerving sensation that the creature was aware of its witnesses. Even during the day, the block felt different. Neighbors reported a lingering sense of unease, as if invisible eyes were watching from high above. Children refused to play near the rooftops, and delivery workers began avoiding certain buildings at night. The creature's presence had instilled a fear that extended beyond the immediate sighting, embedding itself in the routines and psyches of those who lived nearby. Urban legend enthusiasts quickly drew parallels to the Mothman sightings in West Virginia decades earlier. Both involved humanoid, winged figures with glowing red eyes, appearing in populated areas and vanishing without a trace. The Brooklyn encounters were particularly alarming because they occurred in the midst of a dense cityscape, rather than rural or semi-rural areas. Yet the similarities were undeniable. Intelligence implied by the creature's behavior, the timing of appearances, and the aura of foreboding that accompanied every sighting. Some speculated that the creature was a harbinger, an omen of impending disaster or tragedy. In the weeks following Elena's encounter, the block experienced a series of unusual incidents: fires that started mysteriously, unexplained power outages, and strange accidents that left residents shaken. Whether the winged figure was responsible, or merely a witness to events unfolding, remained a mystery. For those who had seen it, the sense of danger was real and immediate, a psychological weight that lingered long after the creature vanished. Others theorized that the creature might be drawn to human density, or the high energy of urban environments. Unlike rural Mothman sightings, which occurred in isolated areas or near sites of disaster, the New York rooftop sighting suggested that these winged beings could operate in the chaos of city life, appearing where the population was large and activity constant. Its intelligence, mobility, and silent observation indicated that it was more than an animal. It was something deliberate, capable of understanding or anticipating human behavior. Witnesses who tried to investigate the rooftops reported feeling watched, hearing the soft scraping of wings or the shadow of movement overhead. Attempts to capture photographic evidence proved frustrating. Images were always blurry, distorted, or missing entirely. Some theorists suggested that the creature had the ability to manipulate perception or remain partially invisible, further increasing its mystique and the fear it inspired. Despite skepticism from the outside, the story became part of the neighborhood's folklore. Parents warned their children not to climb fire escapes at night. Building managers installed extra locks and lights, and the local media occasionally reported on the mysterious events with a mix of curiosity and incredulity. The creature's fleeting appearances left a lasting mark, a reminder that some legends do not belong to small towns or rural highways. They can appear in the heart of the city, unannounced and unfathomable. Even today, residents of that Brooklyn block recall the sighting vividly. The red eyes, the massive wings, the silent, deliberate presence of it lingers in memory. For a few nights in the 2000s, the city skyline was home to something extraordinary and terrifying. A being that bridged folklore and reality, rural legend and urban encounter. And those who witnessed it would never forget the sensation of being watched by a creature that defied reason, yet existed with undeniable presence above the rooftops of Brooklyn. In 1968, West Virginia was still reeling from the Silver Bridge collapse, a tragedy that had left 46 dead and the town of Point Pleasant shrouded in grief. But as the state struggled to recover, another disaster struck, this time in the coalfields deep in the Appalachian Hills. A massive coal mine near the town of Monongah collapsed, burying 78 men beneath tons of rock and earth. The event shocked the community, leaving families devastated and rescuers haunted by the enormity of the loss. Yet, in the weeks and months that followed, whispers began to circulate about something far stranger than the mine itself. A winged humanoid figure seen in the days leading up to the disaster. Miners and nearby residents reported a shadow that seemed to glide silently above the entrance of the mine. Its wings were enormous, dark as coal, and its glowing red eyes were visible even from a distance, scanning the area with an unsettling intelligence. Witnesses described the figure as humanoid, towering, and terrifying, moving with a grace that no human could match. It was as if it hovered on the edge of perception, appearing at times when the light was dim and the world seemed still. Observing the miners as they went about their work, one veteran miner, who had worked the tunnels for over 20 years, claimed he first saw the figure 2 days before the collapse. He described it as circling the entrance of the mine like a vulture, its wings creating shadows across the walls of the surrounding buildings. "It was watching us," he said. "I don't know why, but I knew it wasn't natural. Those eyes, they weren't human. They saw everything." The miner's co-workers laughed nervously, dismissing the account as the product of fatigue and stress. Yet, over the next day, more men reported similar sightings, each consistent in the details. Massive wings, humanoid form, glowing red eyes, and an unsettling stillness in the air whenever it appeared. Even those who had never seen the creature directly reported feeling its presence. A foreman noted that equipment sometimes shifted inexplicably. Ropes and carts moved slightly as if disturbed by a giant hand or wing. and sudden gusts of wind seemed to originate from nowhere, sweeping down the shaft and sending dust and coal particles into the air. Dogs and cats in the nearby mining village behaved erratically, barking or hissing at corners where nothing seemed to exist. Some theorized that the figure could manipulate its environment or instill fear as a precursor to disaster, an omen that something catastrophic was approaching. The night before the collapse, several miners swore they saw the figure perched atop a ridge overlooking the mine. Its eyes glowed red in the moonlight, unblinking and intense, and its wings were partially extended, casting massive shadows across the hillsides. They reported a sense of dread so overwhelming that some refused to enter the tunnels the next morning, citing a primal instinct that danger was imminent. Others laughed it off, assuming it was nerves or exhaustion. No one could have predicted how prophetic that instinct would prove to be. When the mine collapsed the following morning, the force was unimaginable. Tons of earth and rock gave way, trapping dozens of men inside. Rescue efforts were immediate but futile in many cases. The sheer volume of debris and the instability of the remaining tunnels made retrieval nearly impossible. Survivors later recounted the horror of crawling through dark, suffocating passages, hearing the groans of shifting rock, and feeling the weight of the earth pressing down like a living thing. For those who survived, the experience was unforgettable and traumatic, leaving mental scars that lasted for decades. In the aftermath, miners and local residents reflected on the sightings of the winged figure. Many became convinced that it had been a warning, a harbinger of disaster circling above the mine, observing, perhaps even anticipating the collapse. Some suggested that the creature, later associated with the Mothman legends of Point Pleasant, had chosen the coal mine as another site where tragedy would strike, appearing to those who could witness it but unable to intervene. The correlation between its sightings and human calamity was undeniable, linking two of West Virginia's most devastating events in a way that defied rational explanation. Psychologists and folklorists have since speculated about the role of the creature in human perception. In moments of stress, fear, and anticipation, the mind is more susceptible to seeing patterns and shapes in darkness and shadows. Yet, the consistency of the miners' accounts, the glowing red eyes, humanoid form, and massive wings across multiple witnesses who had no reason to collude, suggests that something unusual may indeed have been present. Those who saw it were unanimous in their descriptions, lending the reports a chilling credibility. For decades, the coal mine disaster became intertwined with the Mothman legend, reinforcing the idea that these winged humanoids appear as omens before tragedies. Unlike the bridge collapse, where the figure was seen only in Point Pleasant, the coal mine sighting suggests a broader pattern. The creature appears wherever human lives are, in imminent danger, hovering on the periphery, silently observing events about to unfold. Survivors described the same sense of dread that many others associated with Mothman encounters, a feeling that disaster was coming, that something terrible was inevitable, and that the figure was both witness and harbinger. Even today, locals recount the sightings of the winged figure at the Monongah mine with reverence and fear. Its massive wings, red eyes, and silent presence remain etched in memory, an enduring reminder that some forces are beyond human control or understanding. The story of the coal mine disaster is not just a tale of human tragedy. It is a chilling chapter in the ongoing Mothman saga, a testament to a creature whose appearances are always accompanied by calamity, and whose presence continues to haunt the hearts and minds of those who dare to remember. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, where the ridges roll endlessly and the forests grow thick and shadowed, hikers and campers have long spoken of an uneasy feeling that something is always watching. Most dismiss it as nerves, the imagination heightened by isolation and the sounds of the wilderness. Yet some encounters go far beyond a fleeting sense of being observed. On certain nights, witnesses claim to see a massive winged figure moving silently through the trees, its glowing red eyes piercing the darkness and its presence filling the mountains with an otherworldly tension. The creature, often called the Appalachian Watcher by those who report it, is described as humanoid in shape but far larger than any human. Its wings stretch wide, dark and leathery, and its movements are deliberate, silent, and precise. Hikers have reported glimpses of it perched on ridges, crouched behind trees, or hovering momentarily before vanishing into the night. Unlike ordinary animals, it seems to possess a sense of awareness, tracking human movement and responding with intelligence that is both unsettling and inexplicable. One particularly chilling encounter occurred in the early summer, when a young couple, camping near a remote ridge, experienced the Appalachian Watcher firsthand. They had set up their tent and built a small fire, enjoying the solitude and the crisp mountain air. As night fell and the forest became a dense canvas of shadows, they felt the familiar prickle of being watched. At first, they assumed it was an animal, perhaps a raccoon or a deer, observing them from the underbrush. But then they saw it. Across the ridge, crouched low, near the edge of a small clearing, was a massive figure, wings folded tightly around its body, like a dark cloak. Its red eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed to radiate both curiosity and menace. The couple froze, hearts pounding, unsure whether to flee or stay put. Every instinct screamed danger, but the sheer size and presence of the creature made it impossible to look away. In a sudden act of defiance or desperation, they shined a flashlight toward the figure. The light illuminated its wings, revealing enormous feathers or leathery membranes folded around it, giving the appearance of a living shadow. Then, as if provoked, it unfurled its wings with a speed and power that the couple could hardly comprehend. The wind generated by its takeoff was so strong that it extinguished their fire in an instant, plunging them into darkness and sending sparks scattering across the forest floor. The creature lifted into the sky with a silent grace, gliding over the treetops before disappearing beyond the ridges. The couple spent the rest of the night huddled in their tent, unable to sleep. Every creak of branches, every rustle in the undergrowth made them jump, and the memory of the glowing eyes haunted them until morning. They were not alone in their experience. Hikers, hunters, and campers throughout the Appalachians have reported similar encounters. Fleeting glimpses of a winged humanoid, glowing eyes seen through trees, and the unmistakable impression that the creature is aware of their presence long before they see it. Witnesses describe the Appalachian Watcher as patient and intelligent. Unlike predatory animals that strike quickly, this being often observes for extended periods, moving quietly through the shadows and choosing its moments carefully. Some hikers report that it follows them from ridge to ridge, maintaining a distance but never disappearing completely. The sensation of being tracked, combined with the looming presence of massive wings and glowing eyes, creates a psychological pressure that many describe as overwhelming. In addition to its physical presence, the creature is associated with a sense of foreboding. Encounters often precede accidents, sudden storms, or other unforeseen dangers. Many speculate that it is an omen, appearing before disasters or tragedies in a pattern similar to other Mothman-related phenomena. The Appalachian Watcher, in this interpretation, is not merely a cryptid or unexplained animal but a harbinger, silently observing the movements of humans in the wilderness and signaling that the environment, or fate itself, is about to shift. Researchers and folklorists who have examined these accounts note striking witnesses from different locations report the same humanoid shape, the same enormous wings, and the same glowing red eyes. The creature's behavior is remarkably uniform. It watches from a distance, appears near humans at night, and retreats silently when confronted or observed. Some even claim it exhibits deliberate interactions, as in the case of the campers whose fire was extinguished by the gust from its wings, an indirect yet unmistakable demonstration of power and presence. While skeptics argue that fear, isolation, and the natural sounds of the mountains can explain many of these experiences, the sheer number and consistency of reports suggest something more than imagination. Those who have encountered the Appalachian Watcher describe a physical and emotional reaction that goes beyond surprise or fear. It is a deep, instinctual recognition that they are in the presence of something completely alien and incomprehensible. The intensity of the red eyes, the size and movement of the wings, and the creature's deliberate choice to appear only under certain conditions make these encounters difficult to dismiss. For hikers, the Appalachian Watcher serves as both a warning and a mystery. It is a reminder that the wilderness holds secrets humans cannot always understand, and that some forces, whether supernatural, cryptid, or unexplained, exist on the edges of perception. Encounters are rare, but they leave lasting impressions, memories of eyes glowing through the trees, wings unfolding with silent power, and the sensation of being observed in a world that suddenly feels far larger and stranger than imagined. Even today, tales of the Appalachian Watcher circulate among hikers and campers. Equipment left in the woods is often accompanied by stories of strange sounds at night, shadows that move against the trees, and glowing eyes that vanish the moment one attempts to focus on them. Whether it is a cryptid, a supernatural sentinel, or an omen, the Appalachian Watcher remains an enduring figure of fear and fascination, silent guardian or predator in the vast, shadowed ridges of the Appalachian Mountains, ever watching, ever patient, and ever ready to remind humans that they are never truly alone. Along the winding expanse of the Missouri River, where fog often blankets the water in the stillness of night, boatmen have long told tales of strange, unexplained occurrences. Most are dismissed as superstition or the tricks of light on water. But some experiences are too consistent, too detailed, and too terrifying to ignore. One of the most chilling involves a glowing-eyed figure, a massive winged creature said to swoop low over the river, stalking vessels as they navigate the dark currents. Those who have encountered it speak of fear unlike anything else, a sense that they are being hunted by a presence both intelligent and malevolent. It was a cool October night when a crew aboard a cargo barge first noticed something unusual. The fog was thick, curling across the water and muffling the sounds of engines and waves. At first, they saw a shadow flit across the surface, moving with unnatural grace and speed. Then, just above the waterline, a pair of red, glowing eyes appeared, reflecting in the river like molten coals. The men froze, unsure whether they were hallucinating or witnessing something that defied explanation. The creature moved with purpose, swooping low over the deck, wings extended wide enough to block the moonlight entirely. Its shadow seemed to stretch over the crew, and the wind from its massive wings stirred the fog into twisting patterns. One of the deckhands swore it hovered briefly just a few feet above the cabin, watching them with eyes that glowed brighter and brighter, as if measuring fear itself. Then it retreated into the darkness, only to return moments later, repeating its circling patrol with a silent, terrifying rhythm. For hours, the figure followed the barge. Crew members tried to convince themselves it was some large bird, a trick of shadows, or the imagination stirred by isolation and fatigue. Yet no ordinary bird could have the size, speed, or glowing eyes described. The hum of engines and a slap of water against the hull did nothing to deter it. Every time the boat changed course or slowed, the creature adjusted, following with precision and intent, maintaining a relentless observation that left the crew tense and silent. One of the younger crewmen, a man who had spent years on the river, remarked that he had never felt a presence so heavy, so tangible. "It's like it knows exactly where we are," he said, voice shaking. "It's waiting, watching, judging, and you can't do anything to make it leave." The other men nodded in fearful agreement, each silently acknowledging the same unspoken truth. They were being marked, not hunted yet, perhaps, but marked for attention in a way that foreshadowed disaster. Later that week, the unthinkable happened. A sudden, violent storm swept down the river, churning the water into a frothing chaos. The barge, caught in the tempest, was struck by violent waves and shifting currents. Despite the crew's experience and preparation, the vessel capsized. Men were thrown into the icy water, fighting to stay afloat, screaming into the night as the river swallowed their belongings and their sense of security. By morning, several were dead, and survivors whispered among themselves that the disaster was no mere accident. The creature, the one with glowing red eyes and immense wings, had appeared days before and had marked them for this calamity. The Missouri River apparition was never seen again by that particular crew, but its legacy persisted. Stories of glowing eyes over the water, wings slicing through fog, and ominous sightings along the riverbanks spread quickly among local boatmen. Some claimed the creature appeared only before major accidents, acting as a harbinger, much like the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant decades earlier. Others believed it was a predator, a dark entity that manipulated weather, currents, or human perception to ensure its victim's downfall. Eyewitness accounts consistently described the figure as humanoid in shape, with wings large enough to blot out the moon, eyes that burn red and seem to follow movement with deliberate intelligence, and an eerie silence broken only by the rush of wind from its wings. Its appearances are almost always tied to moments of heightened danger, as though it waits for disaster to be imminent before making itself known. Those who survive its presence rarely forget the intensity of the encounter, the chill in the air, the oppressive weight of observation, and the gut-deep certainty that the creature knows far more than humans could understand. Folklorists and cryptid researchers point to the Missouri River sightings as part of a larger pattern of Mothman-related phenomena. Across the world, winged humanoid figures appear before tragedies. At the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, along Appalachian ridges, and near other sites of disaster. Each sighting shares key elements: glowing red eyes, immense wings, intelligence, and an association with impending doom. The Missouri River apparition fits seamlessly into this pattern, reinforcing the theory that such beings are more than simple cryptids. They are omens, warning or perhaps heralding events that humans are powerless to prevent. Even today, riverboats traveling the Missouri report strange lights in the fog, shadows that glide just above the water, and the sudden, inexplicable gusts of wind that extinguish lanterns and fires. Veterans of the river advise newcomers to remain vigilant after sunset, especially in foggy stretches, for the presence of the winged figure could signal danger beyond ordinary comprehension. Those who have seen it recall the chill of its gaze, the power in its wings, and the lingering sense that it is always aware, always watching, and that its appearance is never random. The Missouri River apparition endures in local lore, a chilling reminder that some forces move silently through the night, observing and marking humanity from the shadows. For boatmen, hikers, and river communities, the legend is a warning. When red eyes glow in the fog and wings sweep across the water, disaster may be closer than it appears, and sometimes the creature is there, not to save, but to signal that the currents of fate have already shifted. In the vast, barren deserts of Nevada, where the highways stretch endlessly beneath a black sky and the horizon shimmers with heat even at night, truckers have reported a phenomenon that defies explanation. On stretches of lonely asphalt, far from the glare of city lights, they speak of a winged creature that stalks their rigs. It moves silently, pacing alongside the vehicles with a deliberate, almost sentient presence, and its glowing red eyes reflect in rearview mirrors with an intensity that freezes the blood. This is the Desert Sentinel, a being whose appearances are as eerie as the empty desert itself. The first encounters typically occur on the long, straight highways that slice through the open desert. Drivers describe a feeling of being watched, a sudden weight on the chest, or the sensation that they are not alone despite the emptiness around them. Then, without warning, the creature appears a shadow on the horizon that grows larger as it approaches, its massive wings stretching wide beneath the moon. Its humanoid form is unmistakable. Broad shoulders, a towering frame, and eyes that glow a deep, unearthly red. The Desert Sentinel moves with a grace and power that no bird or terrestrial animal could possess, gliding effortlessly beside vehicles as though tethered to their paths. One trucker, who preferred to remain anonymous, recounted his encounter on a clear desert night. He had been hauling a shipment across the Nevada flats when he noticed a movement in his side mirror. At first, he assumed it was a coyote or some large bird, but the reflection soon revealed a figure much too large, with wings folded along its back. Its red eyes seemed to burn through the glass, tracking his every movement. Every instinct screamed danger, but the creature did not attack. Instead, it paced his rig, matching his speed. Hovering just above the ground, its shadow stretching impossibly across the desert sands. Over the next several miles, the trucker reported an unsettling series of occurrences. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop suddenly, the engine's hum felt muted, and the radio emitted strange bursts of static whenever the creature drew near. At one point, he glanced in the rearview mirror to find the figure perched on the back of his trailer for a heartbeat, wings partially extended, before it vanished into the darkness. He described a mix of awe and terror, a sensation of being both observed and tested by something that existed beyond human understanding. Others have shared similar experiences along these desolate routes. Night after night, truckers and travelers report seeing the desert sentinel pacing alongside vehicles, then disappearing without a trace. Some describe the wings as black and leathery, stretching so wide that they blot out the moonlight. Others speak of the eyes as burning coals, the gaze intelligent and calculating, conveying awareness and intent. The creature does not attack, but its presence is enough to unnerve even the most seasoned drivers. Many link these sightings to the broader phenomenon of Mothman encounters. The similarities are striking: humanoid form, massive wings, glowing red eyes, and appearances that seem to precede or accompany moments of danger. Some theorists go further, suggesting that the desert sentinel may be connected to UFO sightings in the region. Nevada, after all, is famous for mysterious lights in the sky, secretive government installations, and unexplained aerial phenomena. Witnesses occasionally report seeing strange orbs alongside the creature, or glimpses of shadowy figures moving across the desert with unnatural speed. Some claim the desert sentinel is part of a larger, cosmic pattern, being that traverses both earth and sky, existing at the intersection of cryptid legend and extraterrestrial mystery. The desert itself adds to the creature's terror. The landscape is vast, silent, and featureless, leaving travelers isolated and vulnerable. In this emptiness, the appearance of a winged humanoid figure is all the more unsettling. Drivers report that the creature seems to know the limits of perception, appearing just at the edge of headlights or in reflections where it can be glimpsed but never fully understood. Its movement is deliberate, sometimes pacing vehicles for miles before vanishing without warning. Those who have encountered it describe the sensation as a psychological pressure, an almost palpable awareness that the desert sentinel observes, evaluates, and perhaps judges. Some locals have developed superstitions about traveling at night through these desert stretches. They advise others to remain vigilant, to avoid distraction, and to acknowledge the presence of the creature without attempting to provoke it. Many truckers report that the desert sentinel seems indifferent to human life, unless its attention is drawn or it perceives imminent danger. Yet, the memory of glowing red eyes and wings unfolding in moonlight lingers long after the encounter, leaving a lasting impression of awe and fear. Researchers and cryptid enthusiasts have noted that the desert sentinel represents a unique iteration of Mothman phenomena. Unlike Point Pleasant or the Appalachian sightings, this creature operates in isolation, in a landscape that is as inhospitable as it is vast. Its connections to UFO activity suggest that the phenomenon may be broader than previously believed, merging elements of cryptid legend with unexplained aerial phenomena. It is both terrestrial and potentially extraterrestrial, a sentinel whose purpose remains unknown, but whose presence is undeniable. Even today, tales of the desert sentinel circulate among truckers, hikers, and desert travelers. Reports describe red eyes reflecting in mirrors, wings spreading across the moonlit sands, and the feeling of being followed by an unseen, intelligent force. For those who encounter it, the experience is unforgettable, a haunting reminder that even in the emptiest stretches of the Nevada desert, humans are never truly alone. The desert sentinel waits silently, its gaze fixed, wings ready to unfold, a mysterious and terrifying figure bridging the natural world and the unknown. In the small town of Athens, Ohio, in the spring of 1978, students at a local elementary school began whispering about a strange figure they saw on the roof of the gymnasium. At first, teachers assumed it was the product of overactive imaginations. children mistaking shadows or birds for something more sinister. But as the sightings increased, the stories became too consistent and detailed to ignore. Children described a humanoid figure, tall and thin, with massive wings folded tightly against its back. Its eyes glowed red, like embers burning in the dim afternoon light. The creature did not move or speak. It simply watched. From its perch on the roof, it seemed to follow them with an awareness that was unsettling, as if it could track their every movement. Students began to avoid the playground near the gym, clustering instead near classrooms or under trees where the figure could not see them. One boy, Thomas, recalled seeing it on multiple occasions during recess. He described the sensation as chilling, a cold weight pressing down on the playground, as if the figure's gaze extended beyond its eyes, reaching into the very air around them. It didn't flap its wings, Thomas later told reporters. It just was. And it watched. I felt like it knew what we were thinking. His friends corroborated his account, each describing the same red eyes, humanoid posture, and wings folded like a cloak. Teachers, initially dismissive, began to notice the unease in their students. Several reported seeing shadows on the roof or strange shapes moving in peripheral vision during recess. Though they never confirmed a figure themselves, the tension was palpable, and the children's fear was contagious. They spoke of whispers carried on the wind, fleeting rustles of wings, and a sense of being observed, even indoors. Parents began questioning what was happening, but no rational explanation emerged. The accounts were uniform: a humanoid with wings, red glowing eyes, watching from above, patient and silent. Weeks passed, and the children's warnings went largely unheeded. Then, one afternoon, a fire broke out in the gymnasium. Flames spread quickly through the old building, gutting it entirely. The cause was never conclusively determined, though investigators noted that electrical issues and poor wiring could have contributed. Still, the timing was uncanny. The children had been warning of something on the roof, a figure they claimed was observing them with malevolent intent, and now the structure itself was destroyed in a sudden, catastrophic blaze. Many in the town began to connect the sightings to the fire. Parents spoke privately of the figure their children had described, linking it to the destruction of the gym. Some speculated that it was a warning and omen that the building or the people inside were in danger. Others wondered if the creature had somehow caused the disaster, an entity drawn to tragedy and capable of influencing events beyond human comprehension. For the children, the fire confirmed their fears. The figure was no mere imagination. It had been real, and its presence had signaled something dark. The local press picked up the story, recounting children's descriptions of a tall, winged humanoid with glowing red eyes on the gym roof. Reporters interviewed teachers, parents, and firemen, many of whom were skeptical, but could not ignore the consistency of the children's accounts. The image of a winged figure perched silently above the playground, watching and waiting, became a central part of the narrative. Even adults who had doubted the children admitted that there had been a sense of unease that could not be explained by fear alone. Folklorists and cryptid enthusiasts later examined the Ohio sightings, noting similarities to other Mothman encounters across the United States. The humanoid form, massive wings, and glowing red eyes appeared in multiple reports, from Point Pleasant to Appalachian forests, and even in urban settings. The timing of the appearances, often preceding disasters or tragedies, suggested a pattern. The creature was seen as an omen, a harbinger, or a warning. The Ohio schoolyard fire fit neatly into this pattern, reinforcing the theory that the figure was more than a myth. Some theorists argued that the creature's presence served as a psychological signal, heightening awareness of impending danger in those who witnessed it. Others believed it to be supernatural, an entity that manifests physically before calamity strikes. The children, untainted by skepticism, were the first to notice it, describing details that adults later corroborated in behavior and environmental oddities. And the sense of being watched all were reported by staff and students alike, further lending credibility to the accounts. Even years later, former students recall the events vividly. The memory of red eyes glowing in the sunlit afternoon, wings folded like a dark cloak, and a figure that observed without moving remains etched in their minds. The fire destroyed the gym, but it could not erase the sense of foreboding the creature had left behind. For those who experienced it firsthand, the lesson was clear. The figure was an omen, a sentinel, and a warning that some forces are beyond human understanding. The Ohio schoolyard story continues to circulate in cryptid communities and paranormal circles. A chilling example of the Mothman legend manifesting in unexpected places. Unlike Point Pleasant or desolate highways, this encounter occurred in a schoolyard among children at play, emphasizing that the creature's appearances are not limited by location or setting. Its presence remains a reminder that warnings can come from the most unlikely witnesses, and that even familiar, everyday places can host entities that exist at the edge of perception. In the mid-1960s, the bustling neighborhoods of Battersea and Wandsworth in London were not just filled with the sounds of trains, traffic, and everyday life. They were also the setting for reports of a creature that defied all rational explanation. Residents began claiming sightings of a massive winged humanoid figure soaring above the city at night, casting shadows over streets and rooftops. Its form was unmistakable, a tall, imposing figure with enormous wings folded against its back, and eyes that glowed a deep, ominous red. Those who saw it swore it was more than a bird, more than a shadow. It was something far older, something that seemed to exist between the realms of legend and reality. Eyewitnesses were often ordinary Londoners, shopkeepers, postal workers, and night shift laborers who initially thought they had glimpsed a large bird in flight. But what they saw was unlike any bird or human. Its wingspan was massive, its movements unnaturally precise, and its glowing eyes burned through the darkness with an intensity that seemed to pierce the soul. Some described it perching silently on rooftops, scanning the streets below, while others claimed it hovered mid-air, wings extended, as if judging the city from above. The creature's presence was silent, yet impossible to ignore. One of the earliest and most detailed accounts came from a group of teenagers walking home along the Thames. They noticed a shadow moving along the rooftops, following their path with eerie intent. One of the boys shone a flashlight at the figure, illuminating the massive wings folded tightly against its back. The eyes glowed red, reflecting the beam, and for a moment, the group felt paralyzed by a sense of dread that seemed to emanate from the creature itself. Then, without a sound, it leaped into the night sky, gliding effortlessly over the river and vanishing beyond the skyline. The teenagers ran home, shaken, but certain they had seen something extraordinary, something terrifying, something not of this world. Reports multiplied over the following weeks. Workers on the train lines spoke of glowing red eyes peering through the fog as they walked tracks at night. Residents in apartment buildings reported a shadow crossing their windows, accompanied by the faint sound of flapping wings. The consistency of descriptions, glowing red eyes, humanoid shape, enormous wings, silent observation, mirrored the Mothman sightings that had occurred just a few years earlier in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Londoners began referring to the figure as the Blackbird, though its wings and stature made it impossible to categorize as any known animal. The timing of the sightings became a source of growing unease. On October 20th, 1966, a tragedy struck near Battersea, a train crash that killed dozens of passengers. Investigators later cited human error and mechanical failure. But residents who had seen the Black Bird in the weeks leading up to the disaster believed the creature was more than coincidence. They saw it as an omen, a harbinger of impending tragedy. Families who lived along the railways whispered that the figure had appeared to warn them, but its warning was subtle, terrifying, and not easily understood. One postal worker recalled walking along a quiet street the night before the crash and seeing the figure perched on a lamppost. Its red eyes glowed in the fog, and for a fleeting moment it looked directly at him. He described the sensation as if the creature could peer into the heart of a person, measuring their life, their choices, their fate. By morning, the train disaster had claimed lives, and he, along with others who had seen the Black Bird, wondered whether the warning had been deliberate or whether the creature simply marked tragedy wherever it would strike. folklorists and cryptid enthusiasts studying. The case noted the striking parallels between the London sightings and those in Point Pleasant. Both involved humanoid figures with massive wings, glowing red eyes, and a connection to disasters that followed shortly after sightings. Some researchers suggested that this might indicate a global phenomenon, a creature or entity that manifests in areas where human tragedy is imminent, appearing as a silent observer or harbinger. Others speculated that it could be an extraterrestrial presence moving across continents, or even a supernatural force capable of traversing great distances to mark sites of human suffering. The London blackbird, like its American counterpart, became a part of local folklore. Witnesses described lingering feelings of unease, shadows flitting across walls, and occasional glimpses of red eyes in darkened alleys long after the initial sightings. Even those who did not see it directly could feel its presence in the quiet moments before dawn, a sense that someone or something was watching, silently evaluating the city below. Its connection to the train crash cemented its reputation as a creature associated with omens, a figure whose appearances were never random, but always intertwined with human misfortune. Decades later, stories of the black bird continued to circulate among London residents and paranormal enthusiasts. The creature's similarity to Mothman legends has led to speculation about a broader pattern of winged humanoid entities appearing worldwide in connection with disasters. Photographs and drawings remain rare, largely anecdotal, but the consistency of eyewitness accounts lends credibility to the claims. Red eyes in fog, wings spanning rooftops, silent observation. These details recur across multiple reports, suggesting that the phenomenon is both enduring and significant. The London blackbird remains a haunting symbol of fear, mystery, and the unknown. For those who witnessed it, the creature was not merely a figment of imagination, it was a living omen, a reminder that some forces are beyond comprehension. It was a warning that tragedy might strike without notice, that disasters sometimes come without explanation, and that in the quiet, fog-filled nights of the city, something watches, waits, and marks what is to come. After the Silver Bridge collapse of December 1967, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was forever changed. The tragedy left 46 people dead and the town steeped in grief, but it also seemed to signal the end of the mysterious sightings of the winged humanoid known as the Mothman. For months, residents expected the creature to vanish completely, its purpose fulfilled, its warnings delivered. Most sightings ceased, and life in the small town gradually returned to a fragile normal. Yet in 1968, one last account emerged, capturing the imagination and fear of locals and cryptid enthusiasts alike, a haunting final encounter that would cement the legend in the annals of unexplained phenomena. The witness was an experienced hunter, a man familiar with the forests and ridges surrounding Point Pleasant. One early spring morning, he set out before dawn, navigating trails he had known for decades. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of thawing ground and budding foliage. As he made his way deeper into the woods, he noticed an unusual stillness. The birds were quiet, the wind seemed absent, and even the rustle of small animals in the underbrush had ceased. The hunter paused, a prickle of unease traveling down his spine. He had wandered these woods countless times, but never had he felt such a profound silence. It was then that he saw it, perched high on a sturdy branch of a towering oak. Crouched like a predator observing its prey, was a figure that defied explanation. Its body was humanoid, tall and thin, but covered in shadow, with wings folded neatly against its back. Most striking were the eyes glowing red, deep and intense, piercing the pre-dawn gloom. The hunter froze, unable to look away, a mixture of fear and awe rooting him in place. He had heard stories, of course, of the Mothman, but now he was face to face with the creature itself. It did not move, did not speak, and yet its presence was overwhelming, as if it were aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every thought racing through his mind. For several long moments, neither man nor creature moved. The hunter felt the weight of history in the encounter, as though he was witnessing the final act of a story that had begun years earlier with the first Scarberry sighting. The Mothman did not flinch, did not react to the noises of the forest or the approaching sunlight. It simply watched, a sentinel whose purpose had been fulfilled. There was no aggression, no intention to harm, but also no sign of retreat. The hunter realized, with a shiver, that he was seeing a creature ensuring that its work, the warnings it had delivered, the omens it had cast, was complete. After what felt like an eternity, the creature shifted slightly, adjusting its weight on the branch. Then, with a fluid, almost majestic motion, it spread its wings. They were vast, spanning wider than any human could imagine, and the hunter felt the sudden rush of air as they unfurled. For a moment, the creature was both immense and ethereal, a living shadow that seemed to blur the line between the material world and something beyond comprehension. Without a sound, it lifted into the sky, wings beating with powerful grace, and began to ascend. The hunter watched in disbelief as the figure rose above the treetops, its glowing eyes still visible for a heartbeat before it vanished into the early morning clouds. There was no scream, no flash of light, no dramatic sign, just disappearance. And with it, a chapter of Point Pleasant's history seemed to close. The creature that had haunted the town for years, that had preceded disasters, that had inspired fear and fascination alike, was gone. Whether it had returned to its unknown origin or simply chosen another path, no one could say. But the memory of that final encounter lingered, a silent, powerful reminder that the legend had not ended lightly. Locals who later heard the story spoke of it in hushed tones, the hunter's account becoming a cornerstone of Mothman lore. They noted the timing, just months after the Silver Bridge collapse, and interpreted the creature's actions as confirmation of its role as a harbinger. It did not attack, it did not flee, it did not intervene, it merely observed and then departed, leaving humanity to face its consequences. Some theorists suggested that this last sighting was a form of closure, a final reassurance that its warnings had been received, and that the cycle of foreboding was complete. Others viewed it as a haunting, a spectral figure ensuring that the lessons of fear and vigilance remained embedded in the town's consciousness. Researchers studying Mothman legends point to this final sighting as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that the creature is more than mere folklore. Its consistency with previous accounts, humanoid shape, massive wings, glowing red eyes, silent observation, matches the reports of Scarberry, Molet, and others. Unlike earlier sightings, this encounter was not chaotic or accompanied by panic. It was deliberate, measured, almost ceremonial. The creature's demeanor suggested intelligence, a purpose beyond what humans could easily comprehend. It was as if the Mothman had completed its mission in Point Pleasant and was leaving, not as a predator, but as a messenger who had delivered its final communication. Even today, decades later, the memory of that final sighting resonates in Point Pleasant. The town celebrates its Mothman history through festivals, museums, and tours. Yet the stories retain an aura of dread and mystery. The hunter's account is retold with reverence, a reminder that the creature, whatever it was real and purposeful. The image of the Mothman crouched on a tree branch, watching silently before vanishing into the clouds, encapsulates the enduring power of the legend, a force that observes, warns, and disappears, leaving only questions, fear, and fascination in its wake. For those who reflect on it, the last sight in Point Pleasant serves as a haunting reminder that some mysteries are designed not to be solved, but to be witnessed. The Mothman story may have begun with sightings, warnings, and tragedy, but it ended with silent observation, wings unfurled, and a departure into the unknown, a final act that continues to inspire awe, fear, and endless speculation. The Mothman is more than just a monster. He is an omen, a warning, and perhaps something older than humanity itself. From Point Pleasant to Chernobyl, from Chicago to Japan, his wings have cast shadows across the world. Some say he is a guardian, trying to warn us of disasters before they strike. Others believe he is a harbinger of doom, feeding on fear and death. Perhaps he is both, an eternal witness to human tragedy, forever bound to appear where sorrow waits. But one thing is certain, the Mothman never truly leaves. Even now, reports continue to surface. Shadows on rooftops, eyes glowing in the woods, figures circling highways in the dead of night. Maybe you've felt it yourself, that prickling on the back of your neck, the sense that something is watching. Maybe you've glimpsed two red eyes in the dark, only to convince yourself it was your imagination. But the people of Point Pleasant would tell you otherwise. They'd tell you the Mothman is real, that he walks among us still, and that when you see him, tragedy will soon follow. So the next time you're alone on a dark road or staring into the night sky, remember these legends. The Mothman could be anywhere. He could be behind you now, watching, waiting. And if you ever meet his gaze, glowing like burning coals in the dark, pray he has come to warn you and not to claim you.